Hey guys! This is part 8 of What If Naruto Met a Legendary Creature. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 17, Apex Fury. Anguirus was not like his other kin, one of the few kaiju of the old age that remained neutral, only meddling when it came to those that imposed on his territory, with only the few exceptions when he knew the outcome would either lead to utter defeat in him licking his wounds or in death. He had experienced defeat many times among dominant beings, both like himself and the beings who bore powers that made them powerful gifts. The beings presumably called themselves gods, lords of the skies and heaven, in which they descend upon the world bearing their wisdom and awe-inspiring power to the lower creatures of the earth. Yet the kaiju have lived for several millennia, existing even before the times of ancient man being created by the gods. Though while they were the lords of the skies, the gods of above, he and many kaiju like himself were the lords and gods of the earth. For it was not just the gods who were worshipped by man, but beasts themselves. In the times of old, men had been at awe and fear of the power of both groups. They prayed and served their betters. In turn, some of the great beasts protected the lesser beings from others. This was the way that was designed for thousands of years by the will of their king, their alpha. Then it happened, the great war that transformed the world, the war among gods and kaiju. He remembered as he watched the end of the war of the gods and kaiju, the cataclysmic event that shook earth and sky, the color of the heavens being red with thunderstorms, the land be terraformed and in flames as the kaiju faced the gods, and even other kaiju, beasts that were unnatural to the hierarchy of the titanic creatures. The quadrupedal was stubborn, he knew of battle, experienced his share of victory and defeat, but even as stubborn as he was, the dinosaurian knew well to bow down to avoid a lost cause. Not even his alpha, his king, would possibly survive this war in the end. His leader commenced on final command, one final roar that reached all the kaiju to recede to the recesses of the earth and go into hiding. Like any of the few that may have remained like himself during or after the war, he slept, hibernating his deep state for what seemed like mere moments to him, but was truly over 3 millennia. Time did not waste his body away, nor did it weaken him. Time was nearly irrelevant to something like him, as he could live well over 100 human lifetimes. It did not matter how long he would sleep, as long as nothing invaded his domain, his silence, his dreams, that was all he cared for. Sadly, like all good things, even dreams will come to an end, and that they did. The beast was awoken from a response of explosions, shockwaves that disturbed his resting place, his home that he resided in, and thus disturbed his deep slumber. He rose up from his underground dwelling, both curious and angered by the sounds, only acting upon that rage as he felt the impact of something hitting his body and spreading what felt like fire upon him. It stunned him momentarily, but it only filled his anger more. Taking notice from above, he saw the strange bird-like creature, with what seemed like a lesser creature on its back, as well as what looked like a small sand cloud floating just above him. His long memory knew this was no god. His scent was like that of the lesser beings, the humans that ran on the ground in terror when they saw him or others like him. Yet Anguirus knew that man had attacked him. One quick inhale from his nostrils was enough for the reptile to know the bird smelled just like what had hit him. It confused the saurian beast at first. He had once known man as primitive beings. They made weapons from stone, wood, and fire, soon to be iron. Weapons that they warred with amongst themselves, insignificant to something as himself. Now they have some sort of power that feels almost familiar to the gods that his kind were at war with, but different, not as powerful. Yet it did not matter in his mind nor question what man had obtained nor how long it took for them. This fledgling struck him with it. For while the power of the attack did not harm him, such an offense to him only meant that it was an act of battle. The man was foolish to attack him. Soon he will know, like the men of old before him, that a kaiju never forgets. Anguirus roared as it followed after the man on the avian. Once he retrieved another human, proceeded to flee, releasing short bursts of speed as he tried to catch up. Despite moving at a striding pace for his large size among soft sand, the reptilians soon lost sight of the avian as they moved further away from his vision. He halted his pursuit, quickly digging claws into the sand, tearing a massive trench as it skidded to a halt. Inhaling large quantities of air through its nasal canals, the spiked kaiju finally caught onto the scent and continued his pursuit once more underground. Days had gone and the scent of his enemy was fading from his nasal cavity as Anguirus kept his movements underground, the scent diluting as it passed beyond what was his territory and close toward where there was a steady river. Yet despite the fading trail, his will to find his human adversary was strong. It wasn't soon after moving further out that he had finally picked up the scent of the human once more. He could smell it on the rock line he was burrowing under as he burrowed through the ground. His instincts desired to commence the act of surprise, to catch his prey off guard from an assault below, to kill as soon as the opportunity arose. Ba-bump. The quadruped stopped in his thoughts as instinct kicked in, his senses on alert as the presence of something new arose in place, just under him in the earth. The low, but rumbling beat continued slowly. Anguirus burrowed downward at a slow pace under the ground before his front claws touched the emptiness of open space. He pushed his body forward, his front claws gripping the sides of the earth around him, and his hind legs postured to help keep his body in position as his head made through and saw what seemed to be an underground cavern. The cavern was a large mass that largely dwarfed Anguirus, holding a mass body of water. The space itself would have been pitch black, but it was lightened with a blue fluorescent moss that illuminated the water into a pristine bluish purple that caused the fluorescent light to reflect out of the large reservoir, giving the cavern with a purple-coated light. There were what seemed to be stalactites dripping fresh water into the pool, causing minute ripples that disturbed the flat surface, also dripping down upon an large mass. Anguirus knew when he looked down in the water, while the water was pristine clear, the illuminated liquid had shown an elongated serpentine body that was slightly coiled within the water. Its length dwarfed Anguirus, double, if not more than the dinosaur kaiju's length. The creature's scales were an emerald green with an underbelly to match. The head had 3 horns resembling a crest on its head, long whiskers near the snout. It had 4 small near the front and end of the body, with long claws that had webbing on the hands and on top of the hips. The most pronounced feature it possessed was the fish-webbed ridgeline that flowed from the head down the end of the serpentine tail, which made the tail look similar to a fin. Evolution had made the great beast adapt, making it suitable to aquatic needs, becoming a true hunter of the waters. Despite being able to thrive on land, it had become more renowned for being a force in the waters, destroying ancient seafaring boats, and feeding off the abundance of aquatic life in the sea, being the center of the myth that was to be known as sea serpents. Anguirus knew many kaiju in the days of old. While his memory was old, it was an unforgettable one. He knew the kaiju that held the moniker that was king of the serpents and the great sea dragon. Ba-bump. Anguirus heard the sensation once more, and at that moment, it alerted his instincts to greater heights. He felt the feeling in his bearing down on him, and though it didn't affect him, he felt his will was trying to be submitted by an unknown force. It was a feeling he had not recognized. It differed from his former leader's command under his rule. This felt unnatural to him. With his large periphery, he saw something shine from below the area, directly in front of him and close to the body of the giant serpentine kaiju. Around the side of the room were steps that lead down to a path of flat stone. Further down it lead up to a small dock. Something small, a human from what the ancient dinosaur believed, stood on the edge of the walkway, with their hand held up holding what seemed to be an orb. The orb was of softball size. The color from it was an amber color in which pulsated a yellow aura around it. "It seems you can sense my little tool, my dear intruder," the figure said, cloaked in a black and white hooded cloak. He sensed the growl coming from the beast above and smirked. "A shame you couldn't be ensnared by its will. Perhaps, though, your associate here will be more cooperative once he is in my grasps." Raising the sphere higher, it glowed brighter, as a soft harmonic humming sound came from within. The external light concentrated as it glowed even brighter. "Awaken," the voice commanded in a soft tone, the orb releasing its aura as it pulsed throughout the cave, its light brushing through the serpent, and those started the process. Pale yellow eyes opened wide, slit-like pupils dilated and shaped back to normal before glowing. The large serpent uncoiled its body, disturbing the water as it shifted to its full length of 240 meters. Fins on the back shifted and shook as it raised its body up, drizzling droplets of water into the pool that it resided. Manda's maw opened and closed, releasing a low hiss from its mouth resembling a mixture of a snake and an alligator. Yellow eyes darted back and forth before they caught sight upon the orb being held below, lowering its head as they gazed down upon the holder of the orb. The figure smiled as he gripped the orb in his hand tighter, as a low hum reverberated from the orb, causing the light from it to reach out to Manda once more. The astral glow touched the entranced beast's face and head before it came to a stop upon its head near the crest upon the head, engraving a kanji sign upon its head for will. The light quickly receded back to the orb as fast as it came, the glow from the orb now fading from within. Lowering his hand, the figure took a step forward. Manda, king of the serpents, great dragon of the sea, your will is now mine to use, he stated ever so calmly. Your power is now mine and my clan's. Now, my serpent, you must be hungry after sleeping for millennia. The serpent gave a low hiss before dunking its head under the water before turning away from the figure and dipping further down into the water. Its body came to a stop as it came close to the center and looked up, staring directly at the terrestrial kaiju above. At that point in time, Anguirus had time to move back into his tunnel as Manda with great speed bursted from the water, only a third of his body above water, as he latched his fangs into the quadruped's right limb and pulled him down with his body weight. Both beasts fell into the water as sharp rocks and other debris hitting the swelling water as chaos ensued within. Anguirus felt the rushing flow of water as he was rammed into the bottom of the reservoir, his body being dragged by the serpent, who was attempting to get a deeper bite into the dinosaurian hide in order to pierce flesh. The serpent's movements were rapid, spinning in motion trying to coil its body around the fanged creature. Yet opposition arose, with Anguirus quickly using his spare limber to claw at the jaw and face, at the same time using hind legs to dig under the sea dragon's underbelly. His left claw arm had dug itself right into the nasal cavity of the aquatic kaiju, causing it to drag and cut further into facial flesh. It was brief, but enough to allow Anguirus to free his arm from the jowls of the serpent in duress from brief pain and to quickly follow up by smacking the serpent in the head with his tail. While the body of water was large, it wasn't necessarily deep for the four-legged kaiju to surface up and move quickly to the walls. He could potentially fight his newly acquired adversary, though he knew not here, not in territory such as this. He had faced others in similar circumstances and through experience knew that closed-spaced encounters were next to suicidal for him. He dug his claws into the wall and started to climb, getting enough distance to where he can begin his tunneling. He was halfway into his newly made tunnel before feeling the serpentine bite on his tail, pulling him back towards the cavern once more. He growled in both frustration and pain as he struggled for release. Anguirus felt the drag that was being put onto his forearms as muscles tensed at the battle of tug-of-war. Despite this, he would have it last. He got his hind legs into the tunnel, just enough to get them placed on flat earth. With the strength of his legs he built momentum to launch into the earth and curl his body with tail and all into a ball, body pushing through earth while enlarging the tunnel in the process. With the sudden pull from the quadruped's tail, it caused Manda to launch forward into the wall, his head smacking into flat earth, causing him to release the tail. The serpent was briefly disoriented from the collision, shaking his head wildly and quickly looking at his prey escaping through the newly acquired hole. He gave a loud hiss as he pushed his body through the tunnel to follow and kill the opposition at hand. As the last of the sea dragon's body pushed through the hole, the figure who had awoken the beast was all that remained in the cavern. They gave a light giggle of satisfaction before fading into the shadows of the cavern. I wonder who will survive, even better, who can handle two warring beasts of burden. Now. The outside canyon wall shattered internally. The sound of caving rocks was the only sound emitted throughout the area, hitting ground and water as the group gazed upon the two behemoths before them. The serpentine creature gave a low, intimidated growl from its throat as it released as a high hissing sound, body weight shifting as it moved into an upright position. The muscle fibers and jade scales of its body shifted as it positioned itself. The massive serpent coiled its elongated body, head raised high while it stared down above the opposing kaiju by about 50 feet as an act of showing dominance of the spiked lizard before it. This did not go unnoticed by the opposition as dark eyes narrowed, hind legs leaning back. It gave a low chuff from its mouth, its sharp canines bared. It slammed its front forelimbs down onto the ground, causing a loud tremor, and the waters along the large stream splashed like waves. The colossal reptile was not willing to back down from this display and intended to take this action as an act of war from the other kaiju. The creature stood upright in a slacked posture as it inhaled a deep breath, diaphragm slowly expanding on a massive scale before the kaiju's chest enlarged to absorb as much air capacity in the lungs, completely raising upright with hind limbs holding the form. Naruto stared at the scene with narrow eyes. He noticed a shift in the air as the mighty beast enlarged its frontal cavity. The hairs in the back of his neck alerted him. He didn't need Kurama or Kamina to forewarn him about what was to come. An attack was imminent. He just didn't know what would be the end result, but what he did know was that he did not want to be here when the first strike was made. He took a step back as he quickly looked back to the group. Everyone needs to move. Now! What are you going about, Naruto? The sea Sakura stopped as Naruto moved past her and jumped up to the air. That kaiju just inhaled a large quantity of air. If you don't want to be in the brunt of the impact, move now! He yelled out, hauling ass as he reached closer to the top. Come on, Moss Head! Don't tell me what I don't already know about Goldilocks. I'm moving! She said quickly, following pursuit of the Jonin to the top of the wall. But what about the aka Chio? Stopped at mid-sentence, as she was hoisted over Kito's shoulder as he picked up the pace. Less talking, more moving, Grandma! Yelled out Kito as he followed suit with the other shinobi following behind. Kito was one of many things, but the shinobi was no fool. If the past experiences with the monster of the demon's hunting grounds meant anything in the past year, he knew that moving out of the range of fire was practically essential at this point. The giant spiked kaiju, now known as Anguirus, ceased the inhalation of air, both kaiju poised for attack until it was Manda that launched the upper half of its body with vast speed. It reached Anguirus within a moment's notice, but could not anticipate the attack that would commence from the dinosaur-like beast. A blast of sound erupted from Anguirus's mouth as it roared with such concussive force that it impacted the serpent's face, then soon its body as it was sent several thousand feet back from the force of the attack. The canyon walls shattered as air hit all of its surfaces, shattering rock and debris, changing the terrain of the small gap with much intensity from the front area, with a large gust air retreating from past Anguirus. The group managed to get to the top just before they were blown off their feet from the air current. They rushed through the air several hundred yards before they were able to get themselves situated midair and find their footing once more on trees, while Naruto and Fu remained in the air just out of reach from the blast. Chio, now hoisting herself off the Kiri shinobi's shoulder, glared briefly at the black-haired male before averting her attention back to the scene at hand with a bit of marvel and shock. My word, the elder said softly, that blast, it did that much to the landscape. The scene before them was covered with pockets of dust that dissipated and quickly bore a scene of both sides of the canyon walls were completely decimated. Parts of the ridge remained barely intact while the main point of impact was completely decimated as it was wider in size. Followed by heavy debris covering the riverbed as though a massive landslide had occurred. Naruto looked at the severity of the damage and the exterior surroundings. Definitely a few thousand meters in damage just from the epicenter, 6,000 at best. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at the creature from afar. That attack was just sound alone, centered at one point. If we were anywhere close, who knows what type of impact that could have had on us, the blonde thought. I would concur. Matter of fact, I would refrain from coming into contact at all from that blast. The Raijuu stated. The impact alone broke the sound barrier itself, but the damage as a whole was able to not only expand a large part of the ridge, but cause some massive terraforming. If that was the full extent of his attack, then power alone was worth a maybe 500,000 of your exploding tags. Man, one thing always leads to another when it comes to my luck and these kaiju. Naruto groaned internally. He figured handling Iris was a rare occurrence that he would probably not have to deal with again. But now, seeing two supposedly extinct beasts, it was a realization that Naruto also believed that these creatures aren't as extinct as the Raijuu previously believed. You said that one was Anguirus. Sounds like you had some history. Yes, I suppose there is. I won't give too much. That is the same one that was in the war. As far as I know, he is the only one of his breed that did survive. He is definitely fully grown, maybe not at full strength, but none of his kind has ever been larger in comparison. Kamina told the boy. Aside from that roar, he has strength in his physical prowess. Naruto looked at Anguirus, so nothing else combative-wise. It seemed less dangerous in comparison to the previous kaiju that Naruto experienced, definitely seemed to be the underdog of the species, but a resilient one nonetheless. Why do I feel we were not provided some need-to-know information? Kito yelled out. At least give us the hint that we are dealing with giant-sized monsters outside of the mist. Now's not the time to get overworked on those two right now. We need to find the Akatsuki members. Shinji called out, Kakashi-san, do you recall where the cave entrance was? Not with the whole place was terraformed, nothing seems to be recognizable, but where they were should have sunken in. Kakashi said as he looked around the reformed area. Kakashi moved his highlight to reveal the Sharingan as he focused for any movement around the area. While not as adaptable visually as the Byakugan, it can still focus on traces of movement and chakra signatures within certain distance. He averted his eyes in every direction from where the cavern would have been. This whole area has been devastated. I'm surprised they weren't killed in there, thought Kakashi. He noticed faint chakra traces around the area, which led up to a large trace of chakra emanating from afar. He paused to stare at what seemed to be a large pool of chakra from far across, which quickly disappeared from his peripheral. That chakra source must have been from the cave. Were we too late to stop the extraction? He took note of the possibilities for reference as he continued his search. It wasn't long before he noticed a shift in debris as a large set of white wings erupted not far from heavy rocks, followed by a head in the shape of a dragon with beady black eyes rose up, raising its mouth open as two bodies dropped down to the ground. Over there! Kakashi called out, jumping off the tree as he moved. The others quickly followed in pursuit. Core! Deidara grunted as he landed on uneven ground, patting down his cloak from dust that covered it from the sudden cave-in. He barely managed to get out his clay dragon as cover before the ceiling came down. Fortunately for him, he was able to get it out just in time and lodge Sasori, the body of the Kazekage, and himself into his art. Unfortunately for him, he was not the most favored person in the eyes of his partner at the moment. You stupid ingrate, I knew the moment I saw that beast it would cause us trouble, Sasori said as he glared at the Rouge Iwa Shinobi. Not only did we not fully finish the extraction, but your insolence had caused not only the destruction of one of our hideouts, as well cost me one of my artworks. During the collapse, much of the debris had landed on what would be Sasori's puppet Hiriko, damaging the tail and parts of the puppet's body until Sasori had to leave the husk and escape the onslaught of falling heavy rocks. While the redhead had appreciated his partner and their mutual works of art, his art was physical and was a memento of his progress to perfect goal in life. With Hiriko gone, it was a loss of his historical work, a hassle to recreate an original piece that was deemed irreplaceable. Did you expect me to just let that beast cause me to lose my opportunity to obtain the Jinchuriki? Deidara snarled, looking back at his partner before diverting his attention to the beast with narrowed eyes. How was I supposed to know that thing was going to follow me past Suna? It should have been simple to realize that attacking the creature was obviously not the best strategy at hand, an opportunity indeed, but a naive one if you don't anticipate the outcomes of unknowns. That animal seems to possess a good memory, and with it a very strong grudge. Sasori took a few steps as he looked over at the creature. Regardless, leader will not be pleased until we get all the chakra out of Kazekage. We will have to get to the next hideout for the remaining extraction. Yeah, don't tell me what I don't already know. Deidara summoned out a clay bird and jumped on top of it. He touched the lower jaw of the dragon, which opened and dropped Gaara's body on the bird's back before the bomber dispelled the dragon. The next time I deal with something that hinders the plan, I'll just simply blow up the entire area. That sounds like a better solution. Your art has made you reckless. It will be your undoing one day if you are not careful with that pride of yours. Sasori turned away from the kaiju. As he walked away, it's best we leave that creature to its own devices and head to the next hideout, before we have any other intrusions. A bit late for that gentleman, Kakashi landed on a rock above the trio. The squad from Kiri, along with Sakura and Shio, followed shortly after with Naruto and Fu above them in the air. I suggest that you drop the Kazekage and surrender yourselves if you please. Konoha Shinobi HN? Deidara looked at the group as he noticed different headbands. What's this, Kiri Shinobi as well? I guess Kisame wasn't joking when he said his double was fighting you guys. But to think Kiri and Konoha allied themselves, total shocker. He said. Yeah, well, it also doesn't help when you don't have anyone keeping up on news, Village Blondie Kito said as he grinned. Perhaps Fish Boy should get you guys a subscription of the latest news. Sasori looked over to one in the group in particular, giving a flat smile. That's not all it seems. Sasori, Chio said as she frowned. He hasn't aged a day since he left the village. That shouldn't be possible. Hello there, Obasan, Sasori spoke monotonously before he noticed the sky above darkened ever so quickly. He quickly widened his and cursed before he leaped to the side. Deidara, move! He yelled, making distance from the shadow. HM? The rogue blonde looked at the looming shadow. Seeing the tail come down quickly, he grabbed the body of the Kazekage and launched himself into the air just before the spiked tail of the horned kaiju crashed upon where his land. Rock and dust scattered across the ground as the massive tail impacted upon the ground. The blonde Akatsuki grunted as he landed on the clay dragon, which flew up as the tail swung down upon where it stood. He stared down upon the beast, stared upon to him with narrowed eyes, steam rupturing from its mouth as it gave a low snarl. It was about to lunge forward before the massive opposition that was the giant serpent struck the dinosaurian hard in the side. Manda's open jaws collided with the shell and hide of said beast as momentum pushed the prey in mouth and sent him flying into the wall of the other side of the cliff, breaking rock and crashing waters. God-damned lizard, you have other small fry to worry about, he yelled, flying further up in the air. Sasori, I'm going up ahead, you best catch up. Said Redhead was prepared to move before he was stopped by 4 members of the Shinobi group. The puppeteer sighed, always leaving me with his troubles. He looked at the group and ever so briefly smirked. I suppose I can give them a little dance for them before I go. You make it sound like you have a choice, which you don't, Shinji said. Our mission is simple and it will be successful. Don't sound so absolute there. You may think you have the numbers, but I doubt the effort will result in a fruitful victory. Sasori said as he frowned. I'll be sure to give you the finest art that you will see. Kakashi looked back at the retreating Akatsuki member. We have to catch up with that other Akatsuki member. Do you think you can handle this? He asked Chojuro. The Mist Jonin grimaced for a bit before he looked back to the Scarecrow. I think with my team, we should be okay. If you leave your medic Nin as support, I think our odds will improve. Besides, he looked over to the elder from Sand. I don't think she wants to miss out on this family reunion. Kakashi nodded. Then I and the others will follow through with pursuing the other member with haste. Then he looked over to Fu and Naruto. Let's go, you two. Fu nodded to Kakashi, but looked at the peripheral to glance at Naruto, his back turned away from them as he watched the ongoing fight with the 2 kaiju. Whiskers, you ready to go? She asked. However, the blonde paid no heed to her words as he was in internal duress. Compared to the circumstances with Iris, he had believed that such an event would not happen again. Yet now there were more popping up left and right. He was close, so close to help with Gaara, but this situation occurred with the kaiju. Gaara was a kinsman, a fellow Jinchuriki. He had known his pain, understood it more than even his fellow shinobi. Despite the fact that he knew the outcome of what could happen if a kaiju would be left unchecked, practically as dangerous as a bijou, they could easily level villages. Iris was a disaster waiting to happen until she was stopped by Gajira and himself, yet the difference of this was that the kaiju awoken from the sand was attacked, provoked into destruction, though he didn't seem to be hostile. The other kaiju was an unknown variable. They both needed to be stopped, but the greatest cost to him was time. Too many outcomes, too many variables to occur, but too little time. Naruto, there is a chance you could make it to him. It is faint, but the pulse is still active, the Raijuu spoke. How do you know? He didn't have to go into the depth of his consciousness to feel the blank stare being given to him. Right, talking to supernatural entities. Kyuubi is coming out, right? Is Shikaka still inside of him? No, he is not. I would have sensed his consciousness if he was there. Kurama said, however, there are still traces of his chakra remaining within his former host, 15% at best. That's been keeping him alive so far. So there is a chance for him. That's a relief. He wasn't sure how he could handle it if he failed Gaara. My guess is if he's given the proper medical care he could survive. I can't assume everything. You have no time to waste. If you are going to face those beasts and attempt to save Shikaka's runt, then I suggest you make haste. Kurama stated, as much as I am interested in another monster beatdown, I want to see these fools suffer for the rodent's capture. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Agree with you on that one. He took a few steps forward. Wind circulated wildly around him as lightning charged around his body. The elements were like an external muscle, stretching and waiting to run. The blonde looked over to Fu and then at Kakashi. Go after that asshole. I'll catch up, he said as he launched forward in a burst of speed toward the two kaiju, lightning streaking behind him. Naruto, wait, the gray-haired Jonin's words stopped as the blonde was out of reach. What does he think he's going to do about those two? He doesn't even know what they are. Fu walked past Kakashi. They are kaiju. We're familiar with them, she stated as she looked back at the Jonin. It's a long story. But right now let's hurry and save the Kazekage. He'll catch up. Kakashi stared at her quizzically. I take it I'm missing out on some need-to-know information? As of what's going on now, who the hell isn't? The mint-hair Kunoichi stated as she released her insectoid wings from behind her and followed in pursuit of the retreating Akatsuki, with Kakashi following on her heels, leaving the remaining group to handle the rogue sand shinobi. Core. Anguirus roared out in pain as he crashed into rocky walls, hide and spiked shell dragging along as he was being pushed by Manda's fluid motion. He felt his body shift away from the rock wall and released from Manda's jaws as he was flung across the ravine. Body tumbled and splashed into the water, before coming to stop as Anguirus laid in the water. Slowly he stood up, left arm slightly limped, blood and purple toxin dripping from his shoulder to his forearm from a bite wound that was successful on Manda's part. Venom from Manda's fangs could feel the numbing sensation on his upper right side. A low bellow reverberated from Manda's throat as he bared a sharp grin. Fangs glistened, dripping with red and dark purple as glowing eyes gleamed with hunger as the serpentine body coiled. It gave a low hiss, before it became loud. With quick speed it launched its upper body forward to strike the weakened dinosaur-like creature. Anguirus, seeing the massive head come forward, had few moments to spare. While Manda dwarfed him in size, it was the one thing that he had fair game in. He pushed forward with his hind legs jumping into the air before his body started to spin forward as he curled into a spike ball. Like a hedgehog he moved forward as it crashed with Manda's large head, landing on top of it as it slammed hard to the ground. The spike lizard bounced off the snake's head as Anguirus once more bounced onto the giant's skull once more, earth shaking as Anguirus bounced his spherical body, unfolding himself as his hind legs slammed onto Manda's skull. Anguirus roared in pride as he jumped up in the air once more to drop his weight onto the great serpent, but with his arrogance came consequence. The moment that Anguirus moved off the serpent's head, his fin tail lashed at that quadruped like a whip, smacking the Akiju with such force the impact made a sound similar to a cannon shot. Anguirus felt his chest caving in a little from the force of being sent flying. It only made the pain increase as he hit front body first into the ravine. The kaiju heaved slightly, struggling to get air back into his lungs. He felt the sky darken above him. He knew the looming shadow of the now furious and hungry serpent was above him, ready to strike down on him once more. One eye looked upright at the creature, a weak but defiant growl erupting from his throat as he stared at the serpent. Live or die, he would not go down in submission. Serpentine fangs opened like a fierce smile, blood glistening from his tongue, and side of his head that held small gashes from the assault of the smaller kaiju. He wanted blood, he wanted death, but above all it wanted the satisfaction of feeding on his foe's body. He released a fierce roar, body raising higher than 250 feet, head quickly descending to seize the downed opponent. Raijuu arc, Dai Shigeki. A mass form of lightning struck the serpent kaiju with great force. The body quickly curled and writhed in agony, enduring the enlarged force until it ceased from harming it. A low snarl came from Manda as it looked on the top of the ravine just above his prey, staring at the source that attacked him. Glowing yellow eyes stared into the blue eyes of the lesser being, this human in front of him, daring to challenge him for his claim. I heard your name is Manda. Sorry for stopping your meal, but I'm gonna shut this shit down. Naruto said as lightning charged around him. I wonder if you would ever so politely comply. The moment he heard the beast might roar, he gave a sigh before smirking. I thought not, he said as he launched forward with lightning at hand against the sea serpent. Then let's ride. Chapter 18, Kaiju Rumble. Gaia. The mighty cry of Manda erupted as lightning hit his elongated body once more before shrugging off the attack. He stared forward at the lightning-charged human with annoyance and moved forward with such ferocity as the serpent struck down upon the blonde. But the human was small and exceptionally fast for even Manda to catch with just his mouth alone. Shifting his body at astonishing speeds, the giant sea dragon motioned the end of its body like a whip towards the shinobi, cutting through the ravine wall as it moved closer towards Naruto. Naruto shifted his body as he dodged the tail. It continued to move violently, following behind as fast as the Jonin moved out of its reach. Despite having the advantage in lesser size and mobility, the serpent's movements and large size didn't slack in the confined space, leaving limited space for the blonde to avoid the dodge unless deciding to utilize distance. Lightning hit the water as Naruto's form skidded across the waterway of the ravine. He stood up with Kodachi in hand as he looked over the looming serpent. Raijuu arc, Raimai! Lightning sparked and miniature booms akin to thunder echoed as Naruto raced across the water's surface. Manda's golden eyes shifted every which way as it aimed to keep track of the swift shinobi, but other than the occasional flicker of color, Manda was never given a chance to focus on Naruto. Uzumaki Ryu, Kazekage. In the midst of his lightning-enhanced speed, Naruto drew his sword. The blade hummed with the cloak of wind elemental chakra and Naruto delivered a series of slashes from varying angles. The crescent of chakra-infused wind sliced both air and the water's surface, but they did not yield the same effect when the Kazekage attacks made contact with Manda's scales. The wind blades were reduced to mere wisps, and the mighty river serpent was not even mildly perturbed by the onslaught of attacks. Kazekage Bunshin no Jutsu. The clones each reared back an arm, basketball-sized orbs of wildly rotating chakra spiraling into existence. Otama Rasengan Renden. The army of 100 clones cast a large shadow over Manda, the serpentine kaiju's golden eyes glowing in the temporary darkness as it observed the multitude of clones that descended towards its coiled form. With a hiss-like roar, the lengthy muscle of the massive serpent uncoiled and became a makeshift twister, crashing into each and every clone within the attack's range. Puffs of white dotted the water's surface as the clones were batted aside. Naruto quickly righted himself in midair, channeling as much chakra into his feet as he could to skid across the river. Naruto, behind you! The voice of the Raijuu echoed in the blonde's mind, and acting on pure instinct, a clone was forged to spin and throw him out of harm's way. It was a good thing too, because a pillar of water erupted from his former position as Anguirus's clawed forelimb would have reduced him to a bloody stain on the riverbed. The spike-covered kaiju roared and the waters were parted, sending Naruto's already airborne form tumbling further through the air, while also slamming into Manda. The river serpent hissed, its head knocked back from the force of the blow. With annoyance clearly written on its face, Manda bared its fangs and quickly dove beneath the choppy waters. Anguirus lashed out with a ferocious swipe, carving scars into the walls of the ravine and the riverbed, but Manda's agility proved to be too much for the quadrupedal kaiju as it avoided the strikes before snaking its lengthy tail around Anguirus's hind legs. With a harsh tug, the river-based kaiju pulled the quadrupedal monster's feet out from under it. A cry of surprise escaped the desert kaiju's throat as it fell onto its back, its soft underbelly exposed for the world to see. With eyes shining like gold, Manda saw an opportunity to strike. Rearing up like a cobra, Manda bared its fangs, venom dripping along them, before launching itself forth with lightning-quick speed. Hundreds upon thousands of years of developing a body that would not yield to practically any attack was what made Anguirus. It boasted the ultimate defense during the age of gods and monsters, and though Manda's sharp teeth were able to pierce skin and subcutaneous tissue, the hardened muscle beneath prevented the venomous kaiju from advancing its fangs as deeply as it wished. Manda struck twice more, but yielded the same result. Anguirus growled as Manda decided to aim for the throat this time. However, Anguirus was able to react this time, lashing out with a clawed forelimb to slap Manda with enough force to generate a small shockwave. Manda hissed as a follow-up slap with the other limb sent the world into a brief tumbling mess, but the hiss of pain it released was silenced as Anguirus used its heavy tail to push itself up into a bipedal stance and grab Manda by the snout. With a devastating roar, the spiked kaiju slammed Manda down into the riverbed with enough force to divide the river and crater the riverbed. A spider web of cracks raced out from the point of impact, tearing scars into the chasm in which they fought. Anguirus raised Manda's head up and repeatedly slammed the serpentine kaiju skull into the same spot, but Manda's own durability was nothing to scoff at. Scales as hard as steel protected its body, and so after the fourth head slam, Manda's muscular form tensed and Anguirus found the tail end of the lengthy river beast coming at a dreadful speed from its periphery. Time seemed to slow down for the defense-based kaiju, a shockwave racing out from the point of impact as Manda's tail strike landed home. Ears ringing and vision blurred from the devastating blow, Manda was freed from the grip of its massive opponent, and so the kaiju once hailed as the god of the rivers took a deep inhalation. Its body swelled significantly, and air was drawn into its lungs, compressing tightly before being fired with the force of a cannon. Anguirus was struck dead center in the chest due to having still maintained its bipedal stance. Anguirus's eyes widened, blood and spittle escaping its lips before it was sent flying back several feet and going into a tumble, heavy boulders falling and creating rock slides as it ricocheted off the sides of the ravine. Manda did not let up, and soon the several hundred-foot titan raced after its prey, snaking its body around the hind leg of the land-based kaiju, and quite literally dragged it across the battleground. Naruto cursed from his vantage point as he watched the carnage that was ensuing between the two ancient beasts. There's no way to properly get in between. I barely got a shot in before Anguirus started to attack. It's not the same as it was with Iris, Kamina stated. There were many factors that played into your successful taming of the beast by the end. Iris was growing and still a juvenile. Smaller, weaker, and not to mention you had Jiraiya and Shibuki to assist you. The battlefield was also wider and more open, allowing you to use more widespread attacks and even let Gamahiro assist you for that brief period. I don't know, the river is wide enough to accommodate both of them. That may be true, Naruto, but the rivers are where Manda excels. And while Anguirus is more in tune with the land than the water, he is still considered a monster of endurance and durability. They are mature kaiju and are not hindered by simply needing to feed. Forces of nature stand right before us. Indeed, and remember what I told you regarding the kaiju. Only another force of nature can counter them. Naruto grimaced at the thought. If the fight he experienced was child's play compared to these two, then he worried about other possible outcomes to deal with in regards to future battles with these titanic beasts. The Raijuu is not wrong. You may be more powerful over these past few years, but to single-handedly take on a beast like the kaiju on your own is not something you can achieve with your current state, Kurama advised. Summon one of the kaiju you have made a contract with, and then you need to go and reunite with the others and save Shikaku's Jinchuriki. You guys provide some pretty good counsel. You should listen to us more often then, brat. Kurama scoffed. Who knows how many times you would have needed said counsel in your delinquent days. Naruto mentally stuck his tongue out at the bijou, causing the Kyuubi to roll his eyes in exasperation. The world was a blur of color for several seconds, but what was akin to an eternity for Anguirus. The brownish-white walls of the rocky ravine were quickly replaced with a dense mixture of greens and blues as Manda exited the mouth of the ravine, which bled into a massive lake. Continuing with its momentum, Manda spun its powerful body, and with a hiss of effort, the scaled kaiju hurled its opponent through the air before inhaling deeply. Anguirus recovered in midair, vertical slitted pupils focusing on the kaiju below. It witnessed the telltale sign of its opponent preparing to fire off the air cannon blast, its lengthy body expanding as air condensed within its gaping maw. Anguirus would not take another attack like that, and instead would counter with its own. Its chest expanded as it took a deep inhalation. A thundering boom heralded the shattering of the sound barrier, accompanied by the deafening roar of the desert kaiju. The air cannon and Anguirus's sound-breaking roar collided with devastating force. The heavens seemed to quake and the lake's surface was heavily disturbed as the accompanying shockwaves raced out from the point of collision between the two attacks. As Anguirus fell, it quickly curled itself into a ball. A pillar of water rose up from the heavyweight monster's splashdown, but the moment it did, Anguirus's body began to spin. Water was sent every which way, and soon the near 400-foot-long kaiju became a spheroid of piercing destruction with the intent of turning Manda into a mangled mess of flesh. Manda hissed and fired off its air cannon shots, but the sheer momentum of Anguirus's rolling charge allowed it to barrel through the compressed air bullets like they weren't even there. Manda's eyes widened and quickly dove beneath the lake, narrowly avoiding the attack. Anguirus quickly unrolled and dug its claws into the lake bed, using the momentum to turn rapidly and unleashed a powerful swipe, crafting a massive wall of water that acted to shield itself from Manda's air cannon the moment the serpent burst out from the depths. The wall did its job and Anguirus unleashed the roar-induced shockwave that had Manda rearing back from the force. The two kaiju snarled, their eyes burning with the determination to rend their respective foes apart. Those snarls built up in their throats until they became full-force roars, and the two kaiju charged. The earth seemed to shake from the force of Anguirus's footfalls, and the lake seemed to part for Manda as it sped towards its foe. Kuchios no Jutsu. Jaya. A massive plume of smoke appeared in the periphery of the two charging kaiju. The shriek-like cry of a newcomer came in tandem with a burst of golden energy. The energy blast collided at what would have been the point of contact between Manda and Anguirus, and the two original combatants were sent skidding away from each other due to the shockwave from the powerful attack. The dome of light and energy died down, and both kaiju turned to see the four-eyed beast of Taki standing in the midst of their battleground. The wisps of smoke that remained of its summoning dissipated. A few years was more than enough time for Iris to have developed a drastic change in size, now standing at a whopping 300 feet. Iris released a low growl of affection as Naruto patted the giant beast on its head. Nice shot. He praised the massive beast, its tentacle-like appendages undulating slightly as a response to the head pat. I gotta do something for my friends, so I need you to take care of those two before they cause any more trouble. Can you do that for me? Gao. Atta girl. Naruto quickly activated his Bukujutsu, levitating in the air before shooting off in the direction he last remembered Kakashi and the others were. Manda and Anguirus snarled at the retreating blonde, making their annoyance known when they fired off an air cannon and roared respectively. However, Iris would have none of that, and the avian-appearing kaiju raised its head. Golden energy flowed from its chest before being fired from its beak-like maw. Cor. Kakashi leaped over ledge after ledge as he maneuvered to avoid the oncoming clay birds that honed in on him. Moving one step of the moving explosives in front of him, he used the terrain to his advantage as explosions hit milliseconds behind, making small craters that were just meters in diameter. The gray-haired Jonin grunted with annoyance, pushing further ahead and pursuing the mad bomber flying off in the mass clay dragon. He noticed the shadow of Fu flying over him as she danced in the sky, avoiding the same avian explosives that continued to harass him. Her grace with evasion and speed made it seem easy for her to avoid the birds and have them explode upon each other while she pursued at greater haste than Kakashi. Need to remind myself to learn that jutsu from Naruto, he muttered to himself somewhat exhaustedly as he launched himself past two oncoming birds, the explosion left by them causing him to build further momentum, having him running back on the side of the ravine wall once more. His lone Sharingan eye had advanced from its original state to become the Manjikyu moments prior. His plan in motion was to utilize the advanced state's ocular technique, Kamui, in order to take down the Akatsuki bomber and reclaim the Kazekage's body from the clay dragon. It was all about timing with Kakashi. He only could use the capabilities of the ocular jutsu twice before depleting his chakra any further, and he would be of no use to anyone. The first attempt at the rogue shinobi's life failed. While timing was flawless, his attack inadvertently missed due to Deidara summoning a medium clay bird in front of him to become the new focus of the attack, being shredded immediately by the wormhole that attempted to tear the man's head off. The diversion left the bomber an opportunity to summon out a well more than 100 smaller clay-based creatures to attack the duo. Kakashi had to lay out a new plan. He believed that the man must have been low on resources by now to create his explosive creations, especially now using a large arsenal on them now. This would leave Kakashi having to split the homing explosives between the two of them, have Fu to try and get in close to Deidara in order to distract him, while he would attempt Kamui's second attempt to take the man down. The number of birds were low now, down only to a mere dozen that were surrounding Fu. The drew in closer as Fu made a single hand sign. Hiden, Kokan, she released a large quantity of silk that surrounded her, forming into a spherical ball that encased her. The remaining birds launched directly towards the ball as it remained still in the air. The top of the shell cracked open as a blade of water bursted from it, with Fu holding it in hand and flying above the silk ball before it exploded meters above her. Fu, after him, quick! Fu didn't need to be told twice. Gripping the sword tight in hand, she grinned and rushed forward at high speed, sound cracking behind her. She was closing in by just a few dozen meters and the distance growing ever shorter. Shifting the blade, she poised in for a direct stabbing position, ready to pierce the S-ranked ninja. "I got you," she cried out in her mind as she was now only 8 meters and closing. Yet when she stared at the elder blonde, she saw an upward smirk reach his face as he noticed her. His hand reached out, the mouth ejecting what looked like a spider. Smoke quickly released as the small clay piece of art was now a 12-foot arachnid that was closing in with mint-haired Junin. Momentum carrying both of them as they were prepared to meet head-on. "Fu, move!" Kakashi cried out from below as he launched himself in the air to reach her, fearing the inevitable with the momentum that pushed her closer to ever-impending death. Slight panic reached her chest, time feeling slowing as she was only mere feet from the spider now. Her teeth gritted, eyes closed, and waited for the anticipated explosion. Her mind raced rapidly to many things before thinking of only one thing: "I'm sorry, Naruto." Raijuu arc, Inazuma no Yari. Fu opened her eyes when she heard the voice. "What?" she said before witnessing the action in front of her. A bolt of lightning in the form of a spear pierced through the arachnid, splitting its abdomen from its cephalothorax. The clay creature's movement halted and soon gravity played its part in dropping the object. While at that same time Kakashi grabbed Fu and pulled her out from the air and landed on a nearby tree. "What the hell?" Deidara cried before he noticed the darkening of the sky. He looked upward before feeling the impact of flesh, bone, and powerful electricity crashing into his face. His whole body felt the pressure of air and electricity around him as he was sent flying off the dragon, crashing into the ground at a speed which the force of the punch only carried. Knuckles only cracked as the fist of one blonde Jinchuriki clenched in silent fury, with eyes tinting a pale blue holding the storm within. Whiskers, what the hell? Fu looked at the blonde's eyes, though he was focused on the downed Akatsuki member. The feeling that was coming off him felt so chaotic, the color of his eyes could show that chaos. "Are you alright?" His voice was strained. While trying to show empathy, he was trying to focus on his anger. The blonde felt turmoil regarding Gaara's capture. It was only ever building up. He didn't need to lose anyone else on his watch. Fu stared at her fellow Jinchuriki, not single ounce of banter coming out of him. She knew then on he was serious. "Why, yeah, I'm fine. You got to me before anything happened." The blonde relaxed somewhat, the color in his eyes dimming down to the ocean blues that they were. Fu was safe. Kakashi would be fine. Naruto's eyes gazed into the clay dragon which was landed on top of the edge of the gorge. "Kyuubi, can you sense Shikaku's chakra in there?" It was a long shot, but if there was a slight chance that Shikaku wasn't completely extracted, the Gaara would still have a chance for survival. Kurama simply stared at his cage bars, though focused on the external chakra outside as his host allowed him to sense for Shikaku. While he and his brethren held bonds even at distance contacts, communication was needed when all the chakras were nearby or connected. While the Kyuubi could sense a portion of Shikaku's chakra still within his host's body, the majority of his single-tailed sibling was gone. I would say 85% of Shikaku's chakra has been extracted from the host, meaning more than likely that Shikaku was extracted. Kurama stated, however, "Your friend is still alive, the residue chakra is keeping him sustained, but without Shikaku." Naruto's body stiffened at the news. Taking a deep breath, he relaxed and analyzed the situation at hand. "Is there a way we could save him without Shikaku? Preserve what chakra is left to stabilize him? I wouldn't be sure. No practice has been done in my knowledge, but then again I have been sealed by 3 different hosts in over 100 years. However, it could be possible to stabilize the chakra in his system. It would require a lot of chakra and perhaps some medical expertise," stated the kitsune. "It would be a risky position, especially if the medical user, but done properly, everyone can be safe. Then I suggest even trying such a plan with haste. If time is limited, we are wasting it on pondering," Kamina stated. Naruto processed the information. If there was enough time, they could still save him. If they were able to reach Sakura or get back to the village in time, then it would be possible to save him. perhaps using a small portion of Komiai's or Kyubi's chakra to supply enough chakra to stabilize the remaining tailed beast chakra in Gaara. We can try to do that then, but first. Naruto looked down to the forest area and narrowed his eyes. He needed to resolve another problem. Fu, I need you to listen carefully. The blonde's eyes never strayed from the woods. You and Kakashi need to get Gaara's body out of that dragon, take him out and get to Sakura as quick as you can. He's alive, but we need to stabilize the remaining chakra in his system, or we will lose him. Fu understood the plan, right? But what about the Akatsuki? I'll take care of him. The hell you will, not on your own. The three of us can take him right now. She was about to object further before she stared at Cold Eyes. This is not up for debate. We cannot waste any more time. Electricity surrounded Naruto's arm. You are the only other person who can help stabilize him. This is me asking you to please help support a fellow Jinchuriki, another friend. Fu could hear the small plea in his voice behind the emotional restraint. Whatever pride or objection she had was stopped when she heard him. Naruto knew how proud she was of her own abilities and willpower, but she knew Naruto, the bonds he valued overall. Gaara was the first Jinchuriki he met aside herself. Above being a leader and being in a position of power, Gaara was just as much a kindred spirit to Naruto as Naruto was to her. She denounced her pride and nodded, "All right, Whiskers. I'll let Kakashi know." She ejected herself away from the blonde as started to fly towards the dragon. "Just please be careful," she stated lastly before flying out toward Kakashi and heading toward the dragon. Naruto watched as the Nanabai Jinchuriki flew off before he descended to the forest where the mad bomber crashed down. "Don't worry, it'll be quick." Cor. An orb of gold rocketed through the air, its flight path immediately interrupting the courses of Manda's and Anguirus' attacks. The orb destabilized upon contact, and a massive explosion of energy rocked the lake below, and caused the trees to bend to the point that their trunks were on the verge of snapping. The winds kicked up from the explosion died down, and Iris waded through the lake towards its prey. The three ancient titans' eyes glowed their respective shades of gold. Manda reared its body up to make itself appear larger and more intimidating to the newly arrived Iris. Anguirus released a roar, slamming its tail down and shaking its back and shoulders in an intimidating display that showed off its spiky body. Iris reared its four tentacles menacingly, the sharp spear-like tips glinting in the sunlight. Shia! Gruer! Jaya! None of the three beasts of the prehistoric world shook in the face of the respective intimidation displays, but Iris, having a clear task in mind, was the first one to strike. The hum of energy echoed from within its chest, and the kaiju of Taki fired off 4 quick blasts at Manda. The waters ruptured from the resulting explosions, but Manda was already on the move, having dove beneath the attacks and raced towards Iris. Gao! Iris shrieked in surprise. Unlike Anguirus, who sported protective spikes across its body, Iris had no such defenses, and so the king of the rivers was able to snake its way around the limbs of the 300-foot-tall titan, trapping it in its tight grip, and bared its fangs with the intent to rip out Iris's throat. However, Manda was prevented from doing so as it slapped Manda across the face with one of the 4 tentacle-like weapons it possessed. Stunned by the blow, Manda was then dealt a ferocious stab to its underbelly from another tentacle. Manda released a hiss of pain as it was stabbed 3 times over, puncture wounds managing to show that the durable scales had some form of weakness, fresh blood flowing and dyeing the emerald-colored reptile with crimson. Iris prepared to then fire off an energy blast. Roar! Anguirus thundered across the battleground, and Iris released a shriek of pain as Anguirus leaped into the air and spun to have its spike-covered back facing the bipedal kaiju. Manda was freed from Iris's grip and splashed down into the lake, and blood was now drawn from Iris as Anguirus's back spikes dug into its body. Iris backpedaled from the strike before eventually losing balance. As they fell, Anguirus curled its body into a ball, utilizing the momentum to then roll across Iris's supine form, and dealing even more damage. Anguirus rolled back onto its 4 legs, bluish-green blood decorating its back spikes. Despite the act seeming as if it was a protective one towards Manda, the desert beast revealed that its intention was to the contrary. Anguirus roared while trampling over Iris, a seemingly intentionally placed stomp to the midsection being dealt during the charge. The golden-eyed quadruped dug its claws into the lake bed, and rotated its hips as it neared Manda to lash out with ferocious tail strike. The spike-riddled rear appendage slammed into Manda's side with enough force to make the ancient reptile feel its bones creak before Anguirus followed up with another strike that landed harshly against the longer reptile's face. Manda shook its head to rid itself of the cobwebs that currently occupied its skull, but its golden eyes widened as it felt something warm and wet tracing its face. Manda's body trembled with anger, a series of superficial scrapes oozing with blood making themselves known to the ancient kaiju. The anger was then unleashed with a loud hiss that was more akin to a roar before it fired off an air cannon shot. The blast of pressurized air split the waters beneath it as it made its way towards Anguirus. The subterranean dweller quickly tucked its head into it, allowing the top of its thick skull to take the brunt of the blow, but the force was still great enough to send Anguirus skidding backwards. However, Manda refused to let up. This beast caused it to shed blood, and it would pay with spilling its own. The river-dwelling serpent sped across the lake, easily traversing the space between them within a matter of seconds. The surface of the lake burst apart as Manda directed its jaws towards Anguirus's throat, but the spiked kaiju quickly raised itself up on its hind legs and raised its forelimbs in a feeble form of defense. Sharp fangs bit down, and Manda's tongue tasted blood as over 500,000 psi of bite force was applied. Anguirus roared in pain before Manda's lengthy body wrapped itself around one of Anguirus's hind legs and pulled it out from underneath him. With a sudden loss of balance, the spiked kaiju fell onto its back, and with a now exposed belly, Manda released its target's forelimb and struck swiftly, dealing numerous bites to its fellow kaiju's underside. After delivering 5 swift and blood-spilling bites, Manda prepared to deal the killing blow. However, the river serpent was prevented from achieving its goal as 2 spear-tipped tentacles wrapped themselves securely around its upper torso and neck. Iris released a powerful shriek as it swung Manda off of Anguirus. Anguirus panted in exertion as it rolled itself into a quadrupedal stance, but the spiky kaiju was unable to get even a moment's rest as Iris's lower pair of tentacles lashed out like whips. The dark-skinned kaiju's head was forcefully turned to the right, and then the left as the 2 tentacles scored heavy blows. The tentacles then wrapped themselves securely around Anguirus's neck and torso. Iris growled as bluish-green blood flowed from where Anguirus's spikes impaled the tentacles, but the ancient kaiju of Kazekage powered through the pain to hurl Anguirus through the air. Before Anguirus could touch the ground, Iris fired off 2 energy blasts. The golden spheroid scored home and Anguirus was sent skipping across the lake from the resulting explosions. Iris then turned its attention to Manda and forcefully slammed the lengthy serpent's head down against the lakebed. With the enemy kaiju now temporarily stunned, Iris's leg muscles tensed before it pushed off of the lakebed. Having now achieved the status of a young adult, the ancient kaiju was able to develop the ability whereby its tentacles were able to each split apart into 2. With 4 tentacles on each side bound together by an interconnected membrane, the kaiju was granted its own biological equivalent of wings. The waters burst apart as Iris shot into the sky, but the leap was shown to only be the precursor to Iris's newly unveiled capability of resisting the downward force of gravity. Iris was now able to access the once-lost capability of flight, and for a water-dwelling kaiju like Manda, that was the worst possible opponent. A snake who crawled on the ground would always dream of flight, but would only then be killed by the ferocity of a hawk. Iris released its grip on Manda, and suddenly the flesh of Iris's torso began to bulge and twist. The sound of a blade slicing through the air met Manda's sensory organs, and the golden-eyed reptile watched in surprise as curved blade-like arms sprung forth from Iris's body. The blade arms shone in the light of the sun before a sonic boom echoed through the air as Iris jetted towards its falling prey. Hardened scales and thick muscle were the only things that kept Manda intact, for had it been a normal creature, Iris's first slash would have torn through them like a hot knife through butter. A second sonic boom was heard, and another slash struck Manda. Then a third. A fourth. A fifth. The onslaught was seemingly endless, and Iris traversed the skies with such speed and power that its body was practically a blur of color to any onlooker. Eventually, Manda's scales could take so much abuse and Iris's sword arms began to draw blood. Manda hissed in pain within the air as it was knocked about like a ragdoll, and lines of blood began to decorate the body of the river god. Another sonic boom echoed, and Manda's eyes widened as Iris raised its arms and slammed them down upon Manda's head. Manda hissed and managed to tilt its head, allowing the dense frontal bone to take the brunt of the powerful strike. A powerful shockwave raced out from the point of contact, and Manda rocketed towards the ground. The trademark humming of energy being charged then echoed throughout the battlefield as Iris's chest glowed with a golden light. The light then traversed up the length of Iris's torso before the beast opened its beak-like maw to reveal the concentrated orb of energy swirling to life. The glow of the orb was bright, almost as if it were the judgment of the gods themselves. Jaya! Iris shrieked and unleashed the golden beam of destruction. But the river serpent managed to fire off an air cannon. The blast wave struck the right side of Iris's face, sending the powerful beam off target. The beam crashed down and shifted at a sharp angle as it continued on its new path, splitting the waters and tearing a deep trench into the lakebed before finally crashing down against the side of a hill in the distance. A loud boom echoed throughout the battlefield as the beam turned the grassy hillside into a burned and barren crater. Iris's eyes glowed with annoyance at having had missed its target, but as it turned its gaze back upon Manda, it found that Manda's act proved to be only mildly productive as the serpent writhed in agony. The edge of the beam still managed to strike the right half of Manda's face. The serpentine kaiju hissed in agony as its face now burned from the intensity of the powerful beam, and its right eye practically evaporated within its socket. Iris released a series of rapid clicks almost as if it were chuckling, and so it brandished its blade arms once more. The boom of the sound barrier shattering once more echoed throughout the atmosphere, and Iris's blade arms shone as they were now aimed with falcon-like precision to take the head of the river god. Jaya! The avian-like kaiju released a shriek to herald its strike, but Iris's cry was drowned out by the roar of Anguirus. The subterranean kaiju glared at Iris, its golden eyes glowing with rage as it began to thunder across the lake. Anguirus leaped into the air and tucked its body in tightly. Its body then began to spin, the centrifugal force increasing at such an exponential rate that would make even the Akimichi clan jealous. The spikes of Anguirus made terrific friction with the lakebed, and sparks began to fly with each rapid rotation. The air rippled and the waters began to evaporate from the heat generated, a trail of steam marking Anguirus's path. Soon Anguirus's body became a crimson flame ball of superheated destruction, and thus the currently spherical kaiju claimed the killing blow as its body slammed against Manda. A fiery shockwave raced out from the point of contact. Manda's skull and upper torso caved in on itself, initially cracking before swiftly shattering. The body of the river god caught aflame and flew across the lake, but Anguirus did not stop as it utilized Manda's body to ricochet and send itself skyward towards the descending Iris. Iris reacted on pure instinct and lashed out with its blade arms, delivering an X-shaped slash that collided with the rising Anguirus's fire-covered form. Another fiery shockwave occurred. The air rippled as it became superheated. Lake waters directly below the two kaiju evaporated and the heat burned through to the lakebed, turning it into a basin of molten magma. Iris tumbled through the air and crashed down into the lake, rolling and skipping as its momentum continued to carry it across the landscape. Managing to right itself, Iris dug its talons into the lakebed and stabbed its tentacles down, utilizing friction to slow itself down until it came to a halt. The avian-like kaiju panted in exertion, its body now sporting burns across its face and torso, and the blade arms broken midway. Steam rose from the basin of magma as the lake waters swirled to fill it, and Iris directed its gaze across the lake as periodic earth-shaking stomps were heard. Anguirus's glowing red form climbed out of the steaming crater, magma dripping off its body and not bothering it in the slightest. Anguirus glanced back, eyeing the still burning corpse of Manda. Upon visually confirming the death of the river god at its own hands, Anguirus's glowing eyes met the gaze of the opposing kaiju. A low staccato-like growl rumbled from its throat, and it bared its fangs in a manner reminiscent of a grin as it took in its enemy's battle-damaged form. How dare this kaiju believe that it had won simply by inflicting damage upon its person? The way Anguirus laughed at her made it insulting to Iris, making it seem as if the spike-covered kaiju was treating the entire battle like a game. However, If that was the way she saw it, then it was Iris to show that it had only begun to play. Iris growled, its eyes and torso glowing with golden light to personify its intimidation display. Having fallen once before, Iris swore to itself that there would not be a second time. It had already sworn loyalty to its superior, recognizing its previous enemy as Alpha. However, there would be no other. There was only one king, only one that it would recognize as Alpha. Anguirus was not that Alpha. Iris's 4 tentacles straightened out to take on an X shape, and suddenly the atmosphere itself seemed to increase in density. Iris fed upon chakra, and the world itself was ripe with it. A force of nature powered by nature. Streams of blue energy flowed through the air, entering Iris's body through the tips of the tentacles. Its heavily burned and battered body began to release steam, and the grin that decorated Anguirus's face began to steadily fall away, its eyes widening in shock at the scene it was witnessing. Bone cracked back into place and mended. Muscle, subcutaneous tissue and skin were stitched back together. The blade arms grew back into existence, and Iris stamped its feet and slammed its tentacles down against the lake. Jaya! Anguirus forcibly prevented itself from backpedaling. The sentient beast had its pride, and it would not cower in the face of an enemy, especially not one that could be broken. If it could be broken, then Anguirus reasoned it would just have to keep breaking it until it died. Gruer! Anguirus roared in response to Iris's shriek, slamming its tail down menacingly. The 2 kaiju circled each other, the tension between them being practically palpable. Their eyes glowed as they growled at one another, and then they struck. Iris fired off 2 quick blasts of energy from its mouth, but Anguirus spun and swung its heavy tail, tearing through the projectiles like they weren't even there. Anguirus then curled into a tight sphere, and water was scattered every which way as it rolled towards Iris. The avian-like kaiju quickly flew into the air, dodging the strike. Anguirus immediately stopped rolling, digging its claws into the lakebed to halt its motion. Iris struck like a falcon would an unsuspecting field mouse, the sound barrier shattering as it rocketed towards its opponent. Anguirus quickly displayed its spike-covered body as Iris lashed out with its blade arms, orange-yellow sparks bursting forth with each strike. Anguirus's eyes shifted every which way as it aimed to keep track of Iris. Finally, the spike-covered kaiju caught some sense of rhythm to the attacks before lashing out with a tail swipe. The rear appendage struck against Iris's arm blade, and a powerful shockwave raced out from the point of collision. The 2 ancient animals narrowed their eyes at each other, their respective body parts trembling as they tried to overpower the other. The clash ended in a stalemate, and the 2 beasts forced each other back. Iris didn't let up as it fired off 2 bursts of golden plasma. Gruer! Anguirus unleashed the sonic roar, the sound barrier shattering and ripping through the blasts. 2 explosions of golden light dotted the skies, but the sonic roar continued on its path before it slammed into Iris, sending the avian-like kaiju tumbling through the air. Anguirus charged after its opponent before leaping and spinning its body to crash its spike-covered back against Iris. Jaya! Iris shrieked in pain as it was knocked back from the force of the blow, but the avian-type kaiju quickly recovered and sped forth. Swiping with a blade arm, Iris aimed to draw blood, but Anguirus countered with a swipe of its claw and blade arm met with shockwave-inducing force, causing the lake waters to rupture heavily. The 2 kaiju continued to trade blows before Iris reverted its wings back into tentacles. As Iris splashed down, Anguirus was temporarily blinded by the water, and Iris delivered twin downward strikes, spearing a blade arm through each of Anguirus's forepaws. The spiked kaiju roared in pain as Iris prepared to fire a plasma blast from its beak, but Anguirus powered through and unleashed a sonic roar. The burst of sound struck with enough force to send Iris flying back, severing the avian beast's blade arms from its body. Anguirus snarled as it ripped the blade arms out of its paws and flung them aside. The spiked beast roared as it thundered across the battlefield before curling into its spherical form. Steam quickly began to form as Anguirus began to use its fiery charge, its body burning red-hot as crimson flames licked the air. Iris groaned as it climbed back to its feet, its eyes widening as it witnessed a rapidly approaching attacker. Iris released a shriek of defiance as golden energy charged within the ancient beast's chest. Jaya! Iris opened its beak before unleashing the golden beam of concentrated plasma. This slammed with terrific force against Anguirus's rapidly rotating form, but the burning beast would not back down. It fought against the resisting attack, causing Iris's eyes to widen as its most powerful attack was placed in a stalemate, but its surprise only grew as it began to take note of the steadily increasing heat of the surrounding atmosphere. Anguirus continued to power through the beam, and Iris quickly began to realize there was no point in continuing this clash. There was also no time to dodge at this point, only to block. Iris quickly cancelled out its energy beam and extended its tentacles, streams of blue chakra quickly funneling into its body as it summoned forth its blade arms once more. With a piercing screech, Iris dug its heels and quickly raised its blade arms in an X-shaped block. A fiery shockwave turned much of the lake water around them to steam as Iris put as much power as it could behind the block to withstand the burning charge. Its body steamed from both the heat of Anguirus's fiery attack as well as the regeneration it was undergoing from drawing in the surrounding chakra of nature. The ground beneath Iris's feet began to crack heavily as its attempts to hold back the rolling kaiju were waning. Those cracks then began to turn into massive trenches as Iris's talons ripped through the red-hot lake bed. Iris's blade arms began to glow as if they were turning into magma, and the ancient beast began to visibly sweat. Its attempt to withstand the seemingly unstoppable force of Anguirus quickly seemed to be just a pipe dream, but the avian-esque kaiju began to realize that in order to stop Anguirus, it would need to get it off the ground. Iris's eyes glowed as it halted the lower tentacles' functions of chakra absorption and tunneled them beneath the earth. The ground rumbled beneath Anguirus before the two tentacles erupted forth, slamming into it with enough force to lift the currently ball-shaped kaiju off of the ground. Iris then retracted its tentacles, transforming them into its wings before wrapping its blade arms around Anguirus as tightly as it could. The ground cracked heavily beneath its feet before shattering, a massive crater forming as Iris rocketed into the sky, carrying Anguirus with it. The wind whipping wildly past them, sonic booms echoing as Iris flew up higher and faster than it had ever attempted. The air grew thinner and colder, and Anguirus's burning body quickly began to cool, its body unfurling in Iris's attempt at a grip. Anguirus's golden eyelids fluttered as the lack of oxygen began to affect it as Iris breached a ceiling of clouds. Iris flapped its wings forcefully, a nearly deafening silence passing between the two ancient beasts. Iris stared directly into Anguirus's unfocused gaze, and then released. The wind rushed past its hearing organs as it fell downwards at a dizzying pace. Air resistance made friction with its body, and Anguirus's body soon began to resemble a falling meteorite as its velocity of descent increased with each passing second. With a powerful crash, Anguirus met ground zero. A large mushroom cloud of dust and steam climbed high into the air, and an accompanying shockwave served as the aid in the quick dispersion of the cloud. Iris descended, its wings flapping steadily to ease its descent before landing beside the fallen Anguirus. To its surprise, the spiked kaiju remained conscious after such a forceful impact. It was bleeding and in an incredible amount of pain, but conscious, nonetheless. Iris's heavy footfalls made the ground shake before it raised one leg and planted it firmly atop the beaten kaiju's head in both a show of victory and supremacy. Jaiula! Iris was victorious. Chapter 19, Artistic Ending. The appearance of two strange beasts all but completely destroying the Akatsuki base seemed like as good a time as any to make a quick escape. That was Sasori's thought process as he manipulated the bulky body of his Hiriko puppet through the forest. Deidara had taken his own path of escape, and there was always a plan to meet up at another Akatsuki base made in these sorts of emergencies whereby Akatsuki pairs may end up separated from each other or if they were being hunted and needed a plan of escape. Sasori really and truly did not care for his assigned partner's fate, however. The blonde Iwa Nukanine was too loud and obnoxious for his tastes, always blabbering on about how his art was the greatest and how he would one day find a way to defeat Itachi. He always had pleasant dreams of killing Deidara and turning him into a puppet, at least that way he would be more tolerable what with being entirely silent. In contrast to the blissful silence that came with the imagined puppet Deidara, the loud roars of the kaiju in the distance echoed from their distant battleground. Sasori could only imagine what a battle between those two beasts would be like, but that was not his current directive. Escaping and surviving were his aims. Their leader would find a replacement for Deidara should he perish at the hands of the monsters or the Konoha shinobi, and then he would be able to go about his regular daily life of attempting to create the perfect immortal puppet body. The sounds of the kaiju clash were now merely a whisper in the wind, and the clacking of Sasori's limbs were now more audible, along with the sounds of objects whistling through the air. The red-haired Akatsuki member hopped and spun in midair as he extended his arms to their full wingspan. Clicking sounds were heard as compartments opened in his palms to reveal twin pipes. The inner parts of the pipe mouths glowed crimson before unveiling powerful jets of red-hot flame. The fire blasts washed over the incoming kunai knives, but the grayish-brown eyes of the puppet-using shinobi narrowed as he zeroed in on the already burning explosion tags tied to their handles. Scorched earth and fallen trees were the result of the explosive surprise attack, but Sasori was always a shinobi who prepared for nearly any eventuality. Polished combinations of dense wood and metal had worked to give him a practically fireproof body, and thus he was able to survive the fiery shockwave with barely even a burn mark. Chiyo, Sakura, and Kito emerged from the forest depths, landing in front of the S-rank shinobi. Sakura and Kito took in the rather youthful appearance of their opponent. Given the timeline of events Chiyo would have given them during their chase, Sasori would have been 35. Sure, there were some people who managed to retain some semblances of youth despite their age, but Sasori was practically a teenager. In his early 20s at max. You really have foregone your humanity, haven't you, Sasori-chan? The figure was relatively short, appearing only slightly taller than 5 feet. Its short, mousy red hair seemed to have a life of its own as it reflected the flames from Hiriko's wooden corpse, but that was in direct contrast to the lifeless appearance of the grayish-brown eyes which stared at them. The body was half-naked as he lost the Akatsuki cloak after the hideout's collapse from Anguirus and Manda, and thus was clad in only a pair of dark-colored pants, shinobi sandals, and white shin guards. Its skin shone in the fiery remnants of the earlier explosion, highlighting the unnatural porcelain-like appearance that the body was made of. Various parts of the body's anatomy appeared to be carved out that made it seem as if the body possessed compartments of some sort, particularly on the stomach, triceps, pectorals, and the back. One of the more eye-catching things on the body was the circular-shaped piece present on the body's left pectoral, which was emblazoned with the crimson kanji for core. Chiyoba. The trademark clacking sound of a puppet body was heard as Sasori shifted to face Chiyo, giving new meaning to Chiyo's earlier words. So, you've foregone your principles and decided to ally yourself with people you've called enemies. Guilty as charged. The wizened kunoichi chuckled as she raised her fingers, the blue light of chakra coating all 10 digits. So that means I should probably kill you first. And I thought you didn't love me anymore, Sasori-chan. Her grandson's expressionless face did not shift, and even if it was flesh and blood, it likely would have yielded the same result. The forest canopy shifted and Sasori's form reacted with inhuman speed. He pointed his left palm, and on his back, a small scroll glowed with blue chakra as it activated. With great speed, a blast of pressurized water emerged from the pipe in his palm. The thick trunk of an oak that stood the test of time for what may have been tens to hundreds of years was quickly bisected along with the branches of those adjacent to it as Sasori followed after his hidden target. The water blast finally forced the hidden shinobi out into the open, both Shinji and Chojuro now within Sasori's field of vision as they burst out of the remnants of the forest canopy. They had been hiding it. Shinji reached behind him and utilized the power of his Kekkai Genkai to pull his spine free from his body, his vertebrae immediately regenerating as if he hadn't just done what some would consider a horrific act. The spine was fluid and flexible, yet strong like a whip. The whip of vertebrae was then wrapped around Chojuro's ankle, and the Kagaya clan survivor swung his comrade around, building up as much momentum as he could within a single revolution before hurling the blue-haired swordsman towards Sasori. Hiramikarii Kaihu, Hanma! Chojuro descended from the forest canopy, Hiramikarii glowing blue with chakra that had taken the form of a hammerhead. HRH! Chojuro roared, swinging one of legendary 7 swords of Kirigakyo with as much force as he could muster. One of the scrolls on Sasori's back was pulled out with a chakra string, the small cylinder unfurling and unleashing a small plume of smoke. The trademark rattling of a puppet echoed throughout the battlefield, followed by a resounding clang as chakra-enhanced steel met chakra-enhanced steel. Two puppets, both rather generic in appearance as far as puppet designs go, clad in crimson cloaks and each wielding twin swords instead of arms, were the sources of Chojuro's inability to strike home. With a quick tug of his chakra strings, Sasori applied greater amounts of force and pushed the Kazekage shinobi back. Chojuro backflipped with the blow and landed deftly on his feet, but Sasori capitalized on his opponent's momentary pause, and the blue-haired teenager was aimed to be skewered on the poison tip of the kunai that were launched from the belly of one of the two puppets. However, the Hiriko's eyes narrowed to reflect its wielder's confusion as Chojuro's body shifted backwards suddenly. Chojuro sweated slightly, the dark black-purple poison shining from the light that broke through the tree leaves as they were embedded in the ground just in front of Chojuro's feet. Sasori seemed to scowl before the sound of feet against grass met his auditory sensors. Shinaro! Urashima Ryu, Tekken! Kito and Sakura leaped from opposite ends, Sakura from the left, and Kito going from the right. They cocked their dominant fists back with the intent of shattering Sasori's body into splinters, but the former Suna shinobi quickly pulled his puppets in front of them to take the blows for him. Wood cracked heavily as the force of fists that could shatter the earth collided with the contraptions. The end result of the puppets' shattering was almost immediate, and Sasori leaped back and extended his arms. Gouts of flame shot forth from the pipes in his palms, but the two chunin immediately fell to the ground as if by some invisible force. The flames raced over their heads, the searing heat singing the tips of Sakura's. Another plume of smoke heralded the arrival of another pair of puppets from Sasori's arsenal. Glints of silver flashed from within the dark maw of the puppets, and a storm of poison-tipped saban flew towards the Kazekage native. Kito would have moved to catch them with reflexes he had honed through his years of hard work, but as much as he had confidence in his fellow shinobi's skills, Shinji did not want to take the chance of his teammate possibly nicking his finger in the process. Sasori's poisons were always fatal, as Chio had informed them, and so the last Kaguya sped in front of his comrade. The bones of his sternum and anterior ribs fused and hardened for a brief moment to generate a literal chest plate that deflected the needles and sent them clattering to the forest floor. "I could have caught them. Thank you," is the response you're looking for. Kito rolled his eyes before he heard the trademark rattling of the puppets once more. Shinji raised his fingers and fired off a number of bony bullets comprised of his rapidly regenerating distal phalange bones. Sasori countered with another storm of saban from Hiriko's mouth, the lightweight and high-speed projectiles all dropping to the ground as they collided with each other. Taking advantage of the mildly obscured vision his opponent would have, Shinji immediately channeled chakra into his feet and drew a blade of bone out from between his shoulder blades. The bone sword prepared to be swung, but Shinji quickly had to lean his head back and shift his weapon into a defensive position as a plume of smoke appeared and a puppet swung a poisonous side blade at his face. Sparks flew as bone met steel, and Shinji quickly dropped to the ground in a perfect split as the puppet fired off a round of saban from its mouth. As the saban sailed through the air, they were immediately batted aside by Sakura's kunai before they could hit her. She then hurled the kunai towards the offending puppet, which batted it aside with an arm forged of heavy iron. Another plume of smoke brought about the appearance of a fourth puppet, this one hovering through the air like a hawk would its prey before a compartment in its torso opened up. Not wanting to see what those falling projectiles could do, Chojuro quickly swung Hiramakerii. Hiramakerii Kaihu Senbin! Large saban, practically lances, of solidified water chakra whizzed through the air, each one moving with pinpoint accuracy. The chakra-forged projectiles pierced through the falling spheres, and it was then the falling orbs were revealed to be explosives as the air above them was ignited. A powerful shockwave caused them all to skid backwards as the chain reaction of explosions occurred. HRH! Sakura clapped her hands together, generating a powerful shockwave that ripped apart the resulting smoke cloud so that Sasori wouldn't be able to strike at them from an obscured vantage point. Good thing too, because the moment the smoke cloud was dissipated, it was revealed Sasori had taken the opportunity to unleash the full might of his arsenal. A puppet user's skills are revealed by the number of puppets they can use. Sasori stated as a massive shadow was cast over the 5 shinobi in front of him. Chiyo-ba was once hailed as the supreme due to being able to wield 10, but I don't think you can hold that title anymore. Can you, Ba-chan? By Kami. Chiyo whispered in shock as the cacophony of rattles and clacks met her ears. She could not count the exact amount, but there were well over 10 puppets. Each one held aloft by the chakra strings that were tethered from a chakra core in the wielder's chest cavity. The wires of pure blue energy wafted in the wind, the puppets doing the same, and if one were to wonder if chakra strings could get tangled, this would be the moment. Numbers aren't anything if they have no power behind them. We'll break that doll collection of yours. Kito spoke with confidence as he slammed his right fist into his left palm. The air rippled around his hands as his fire-natured chakra was eager to burn the wooden contraption to cinders. Maybe, but we'll see how long Chiyo-ba can prevent you from being hit by my poisons. Grayish-brown eyes met dark brown before they glanced to her fingertips, each one glowing with the faint blue light of chakra. Those abrupt movements that allowed them to dodge those attacks were definitely not natural, but I guess even you would end up resorting to using live humans as puppets one day. You don't speak to me about using live humans for puppets, Sasori-chan. Chiyo's words were like venom on her tongue. Your personal quest for achieving what you think is perfection. You've torn innocent lives from the village, and for what? A flamethrower, a water cannon, and an army of 100. You talk as if that isn't progress. Sasori's eyes were blank as always, but the way the sunlight struck them at that moment made it seem as if there was a glint of mania to them. Now let's see how long you can hold out. Sasori unleashed the horde of puppets, and immediately the four chunin struck. A multitude of them swarmed Sakura, but the student of Tsunade was exactly that. She lashed out with a ferocious right hook, shattering the head of one puppet before swinging it away to then duck under the swipe of a puppet whose arm was a scythe. She pushed up through her knees, the uppercut scoring home, and the puppet exploded into splinters as its skull was shattered. Another poison sword-wielding puppet came at her from behind, but she felt a light tug on her left ankle from Chiyo's chakra stirring, alerting her to the danger, and so she raised her arm, parrying the slash upwards before she lashed out with a back kick that caused its torso to cave in on itself and slam into several other puppets behind it. Going with the momentum of her, she used the force of her back kick to push herself into a forward roll, crashing her knee into the back of the neck of a charging puppet, snapping the wood with ease. She glanced out of her periphery, seeing another red-cloaked contraption rattling towards her. The same puppet whose neck she snapped, she planted her hands down on its back, adhering to the surface with chakra, and pivoted. Her body swung and she crashed a mighty kick against 3 puppets in succession, tearing through their bodies like a knife through butter. She went with the momentum of her rotation, spinning out of the way of a downward slash and then countering with a back fist. The wood shattered before another puppet came at her with the intent of skewering her on its claws. Sakura dropped her body low, avoiding the outstretched arms of her target, and wrapping the wooden humanoid in her tight grip. She leaned backwards, using her flexibility and core strength to go into a powerful suplex that crushed the puppet's head. Chiyo's chakra strings made her legs swing overhead to both avoid a stream of poisonous gas and bring her back to her feet. With her grip still on the puppet corpse, she hurled the body against its brethren, scattering them. Her hand lashed out like a snake, her hand akin to serpentine jaws that bit down with terrifying force. The arm of a puppet snapped as she raised the said-wielding puppet into the air and crashed a heavy kick into its chest. With her grip on the arm still secured, the limb popped right out of the joint and Sakura spun, swinging the arm like a club and nailing another puppet against the side of its head. The head sailed through the air before it caught aflame after being caught in the fiery grip of one Kito Urashima. He took the burning head and shoved it into the mouth of a puppet whose maw was lined with serrated teeth which buzzed like a saw. The burning puppet head was shredded, but it gave the nintaijutsu user enough time bend his knees and dig his fingers into the puppet's chest. In a show of brutality, his triceps tensed, and he ripped the puppet in half and hurled both halves against other puppets. A puppet came at him from the right, aiming to cleave him with legs lined with poisonous spikes. The puppet was flexible and limber, its legs moving in an almost ragdoll-like fashion that provided unpredictability, but from the way the ground cracked from some of those close calls, it showed the puppet possessed some degree of mass to provide a weight behind its blows. Had it not been for Chiyo's assistance with his maneuverability, He would have likely been nicked or scratched at some point in the exchange as the puppet hopped into the air and spun its legs like a propeller. A small gust of wind occurred, showing just how fast the limbs were spinning, but Chio provided some extra oomph to his dodge as he leaned backwards. His hard-earned flexibility allowed the strike to sail over his head before he lashed out with his own legs. He clung to the puppet's skull with his thighs and with a powerful application of force, crushed the puppet's skull between them. The body fell limp and Kito reached up and grabbed the puppet's limbs from its hip joints, wrenching them free from the sockets before swinging them like spiked clubs. Wood shattered and metal dented as newly made puppet corpses began to litter the battleground. He was forced into a duck by Chio's chakra strings as an axe swing nearly cleaved his head from his shoulders. He swung his own weapons back, impaling the puppet's torso with the leg spikes. He spun, grabbed the puppet by its axe arm and wrenched it free, hurling the weapon into the torso of another puppet in the distance before slamming his target down to stamp on its head, ending its short-lived career. 2 sword slashes came from a twin-blade-wielding enemy, but Kito bobbed and weaved beneath them. The hum of the blades was heard as they passed by his ears as he bent his wrists and nailed the puppet's own wrists. The blades fell from its slackened grip and Kito snatched them out of the air and spun, tearing deep wounds into the puppets that encircled him before tossing them into the air. With expert timing, he hopped into the air and delivered a split kick, his feet hitting the base of the swords precisely and sent them speeding through the air like arrows. The sword blades speared through 3 puppets in succession before Kito landed on the ground. A poison-tipped spear came at the taijutsu expert from behind, but the weapon was halted in midair as a bony whip wrapped itself securely around the polearm. Ha! Shinji grunted as he hurled the spear back towards its user with his vertebral whip. The spear dug into the puppet's skull and it dropped lifelessly to the ground. See, now something like that is what deserves a thank you, Kito exclaimed. The white-haired Kagaya rolled his eyes at his fellow Kirinin before he jumped away from a cloud of poison sent his way. The cloud then multiplied as more puppets unleashed more of the violet-black gases towards him and his comrades in arms. Suetun, Daibakufu no Jutsu. Though not as powerful or widespread as the one the Kisame clone had performed, it was still strong enough to do the job of washing over the poison gas cloud. The water jutsu continued on its warpath, but the small wave was immediately cleaved in 2 by the blast of pressurized water Sasori unleashed from the pipe in his palms. A scar was forged in the earth and both Chojuro and Shinji jumped aside. Shinji aimed his fingers while Chojuro's blade glowed with chakra. Tenshi Sendan. Hiram Karai Kai Ho Ya. Arrows of solid chakra were forged from the 7 swords swing, flying alongside the bullets made of Shinji's phalangeal bones. Sasori tugged on his puppets and 3 barrel-bodied contraptions formed a wall of wood and steel in front of their user. The oncoming projectiles impaled them, but they survived their task and were thus later hurled towards them like cannonballs. Okasho! The 3 heavyweight puppets found themselves halted in their charge as Sakura dove from above and crashed a heavy punch against the side of the leftmost puppet. Due to being positioned in a single line, it was very easy to cause a ripple effect that shattered the 3 gorilla-sized weapons into shrapnel and splinters. You okay? Yeah, thanks to you, Sakura-san. Sakura gave the bespectacled Kirinin a fist bump. The 2 shinobi's eyes then hardened like steel within a millisecond, their chakra-charged legs causing them to surge forward. Sakura caught the puppet that was about to maul Chojuro from behind with a lariat, crushing its torso, while Chojuro had his sword extend into the shape of a long sword to horizontally bisect the one that aimed to blow a cloud of poison gas at the pinkette. There seems to be no end, Kito exclaimed as he regrouped with the others, hopping over a puppet that caused the ground to crater with an explosive set of kunai. We have to cut the strings, literally. Then we need to clear a path to Sasori. Sakura pointed at the red-haired Akatsuki. But we're barely making a dent in these numbers. We're single-unit fighters, not widespread attackers. And that, my dear Haruno, is where you are wrong. The Urashima clan member winked slyly at the pinkette before gesturing to Shinji. Shinji's bloodline is meant for being a one army. There was no signal from his teammates. No hand signs. It was simply like a flip had been switched for the teenaged Kagaya as his chakra flared and his skeletal structure responded in kind. The flare of blue energy flickered and licked at the air. Shinji's eyes were closed in focus and Sakura's eyes widened in amazement, as Shinji's bones lengthened and sharpened from every joint in his body. Even his vertebral joints protruded from his skin, giving him a row of spikes that stretched along the length of his back. Karamatsu no Mai. In a burst of speed, the ground cratered where he once stood, and Shinji became a walking death machine. His bones, which could match steel in durability, and in some cases, cut through it, were shown in such a manner that Sasori could only stare as tens of his puppets were brought to heel. Shinji spun, slashed, punched, kicked, skewered, speared, and shredded. He performed any and every act of mutilation one could perform with a bladed weapon, and then some. The puppets were mowed down until finally a path had been cleared to Sasori, but the former Suna shinobi opened up a compartment in his abdomen, and a tightly wound cable was found in exchange for his intestines. The cable shot out, thick as rope but heavier and far more deadly as it was tipped with a poisonous hook. Sasori's eyes shone with malicious intent as he knew this attack would land, but suddenly Shinji's body dropped and twisted at an angle that would not have been possible given his current positioning. What the? The tail cut nothing but air, and his eyes narrowed as he saw the twitching fingers of his grandmother. Damn you, Chiyoba! Now Chojuro! Shinji shouted to his teammate. Suetun, Teppadama! With the tail now in full extension and Shinji somewhat out of the way of his line of sight, Chojuro formed a quick hand sign and unleashed a powerful bullet of water from his mouth. The fast-paced projectile collided with Sasori's body, sending it skidding backwards, but the seven swords wielder merely used it as a distraction to go into a swift rush attack and deliver a wide-arced slash. An arc of cutting chakra sliced through the chakra strings, and the remaining crimson-cloaked puppets clattered to the ground lifelessly. Sakura-san! Kito! On it! The two close-range combatants sped out of the brush upon hearing Chojuro's call. Kito came from the right while Sakura struck from the left, their respective fists clenched tightly as they charged towards the puppet body. Too slow! The metallic rope was rewound, violently whipping through the air in such a manner that it even carved small trenches in the ground. Sasori used his chakra strings and the fact that his own body did not adhere to the physical limitations of human anatomy to spin his torso around like a top. The metal cord was swung like a tail, aiming to cleave the heads from both Sakura and Kito. Kito was the closest in the weapon's range, and so the blade sung as it sailed through the air. As if, Kito quickly reacted, leaning his body backwards so that it was nearly parallel to the ground. His reaction speed was great, but the width of the blade at the was far too much to overcome in such a short space of time. The poisonous edge would scrape his cheek, that much Sasori was confident in, and given the strength of his poisons, that would be enough to render the Kirigakure Taijutsu specialist a paralyzed and dying mess on the forest floor. However, Kito's neck and upper back were tilted back by the nearly unseen force that was his grandmother's chakra strings. No! Sasori roared with rage and annoyance. Yes! Kito whooped as was quickly readjusted before lashing out with a strong kick to the metallic weapon. With a resounding clang, the cord was sent veering off course, but Sasori did not let the fact that he had missed hinder his task as he quickly regained control of it. It continued with its momentum, this time turning its sharp tip towards Sakura. The emerald-eyed kunoichi raised her hands, chakra empowering her muscles as her master had taught her, and grabbed the sides of the triangular-shaped weapon. Sakura skidded backwards as the momentum of the fast-moving weapon pushed against her. Small trenches formed as she dug her heels in, utilizing friction to slow her movement until she finally came to a halt. Sasori's eyes widened as he looked at the Konoha kunoichi. There were simply too many surprises within that single moment for the former Sunagekure shinobi. There was the fact that she had caught his weapon, then she stopped it, and now the final surprise came when the sound of creaking and cracking met his ears. Game over. Sasori watched as Sakura's arm flexed, and suddenly the world became a blur of color. Blues, browns, and greens are swirled together in a myriad of blends as Sakura pulled her opponent towards her with all the strength she could muster. Earth met sky, and then it all came to an abrupt halt. Shanaroo! Time seemed to slow for Sasori as Sakura's powerful fist impacted with his body. The world was quiet for a brief second before a powerful shockwave raced out from the point of contact, causing the grass beneath them to shift significantly as if a great and violent wind had blown through the area. The pieces of wood and metal clattered on the ground like a broken toy, and all was still. Did we do it? Chojuro panted. I believe so, Shinji stated. He did not appear tired, but his fatigue was evident by the sweat shined against his skin and the more audible breaths he took. We nailed it. Way to stick it to him, Haruno. Sakura offered the Urashima clan member a small smile for his boisterous demeanor before turning to the grandmother of their fallen foe. We did it. Sakura smiled at the elderly woman. Chiyoba-sama, we did it. The 5 shinobi all panted and glanced to one another, toothy grins present on their faces in the wake of the broken body of Akasuna no Sasori. Clack! Rattle! Clatter! Clink! The sounds were deafening, and it made their heads turn. Their movements were stiff and jerk-like, their disbelief evident on their faces. Even the usually emotionless visage of Shinji could not hide his shock at seeing the puppet body of Akasuna no Sasori suddenly floating around if it were controlled by a poltergeist. The cylindrical object marked with the kanji for scorpion emblazoned on it was the first to put itself back into place within the levitating body's visage. In what was only a matter of seconds felt like it was occurring in slow motion for the 5 as Sasori's body was pieced back together, as easily as a children's jigsaw puzzle. I'm impossible, Sakura whispered. BB but how? Chojuro stuttered. Haruno, what the hell? I thought you nailed him. I did. The Pinkette shouted back to the Kirigakure's resident taijutsu user. I did. I know I did. I felt his body break when I hit it. And that's where you are wrong, Konoha girl. The red-haired Nuke-Nin's body released a sudden snap and clack, and the 5 shinobi before him tensed. My body is undying. I can control it to break apart and reconstruct it as much as I need to. But how did you? Chiyo's eyes scanned Sasori's body before it zeroed in on the scorpion kanji. A brief flash of her memory came to the forefront as she realized there seemed to be what looked like organic material, blood vessels of some kind, wrapped around the cylinder. You're not fully puppet. What? What do you mean, Chiyoba-sama? Kito asked. That thing in his chest. Chiyo pointed to the scorpion-labeled object. It's a core, isn't it? You're still in your developmental stages of achieving your perfect body, and while you've made great strides, it seems that even you, someone who has somewhat transcended humanity, still needs a heart. Sasori was quiet, his body hunched over as the sounds of his body's mechanics rattled. The 4 Chunin steadied their bodies as they prepared for battle once more. The sounds were revealed to be due to a compartment in his back opening up. A small scroll popped out which Sasori prepared to catch. Don't let him use that scroll, Chiyo exclaimed. Any weapon he has, we need to keep him from using it. Gotcha, Chiyoba-sama. The sound of groundbreaking was heard as Kito took off. The scroll was about to be immediately snatched out of the air by the Kirigaku shinobi, but the scroll was quickly pulled down as Sasori attached a chakra string to the item. Kito cursed as he landed, digging his heels in and spinning to face his opponent. A smart move, Chiyoba, Sasori commented as Kito took off once more. A trail of dust and dirt marked the taijutsu specialist's path as he seemed to materialize behind the S-rank shinobi with the intent of dealing a surprise attack. However, his eyes widened when Sasori's head spun around in a full 180-degree. As was previously revealed with his torso, with no bones or flesh to hinder physical movement, the puppet body's anatomy was able to move in ways that would not have been possible before. Sasori's mouth opened and the shine of metal greeted Kito's eyes. A storm of poison-tipped saban aimed to pierce the younger shinobi's flesh, but luckily Chiyo still had her chakra strings attached to the Chunin, and so was able to quickly yank him downwards. A series of light thunks were heard as the trees behind Kito were now decorated with the weapons. The Urashima clan member performed a cat spring, landing firmly on his feet as he took a deep breath. Chakra collected within his lungs before converting into his primary nature of fire. Katon, Gakaku no Jutsu! The spheroid of raging hot flame burst forth from Kito's lips, but the former Sunigakure shinobi quickly leaped backwards. The flames licked at his body, but Sasori quickly leaped out of the blaze before he could suffer any significant damage. He wasn't given a moment to rest, however, as Shinji and Chojuro circled around him. Blades of grass and particles of dirt were kicked up as the two swordsmen struck from opposite sides. A chakra-cloaked Hiramikari and a blade forged from its user's own Kekei Genkai were swung in tandem. Hiramikari Kaiho Tai 2 Tsubaki no Mai. Without missing a beat, twin compartments at Sasori's hips opened out, revealing twin poles. The poles extended, and each pole released 5 curved blades which served to block the oncoming attacks. Durable as they were unable to withstand the sheer force of the strikes of a chakra-enhanced sword, and so the blades by Chojuro's side were dented heavily as orange sparks from the friction dotted the battleground. Sasori then stretched out his arms, compartments in his palms opening up to reveal twin pipes which unleashed twin tongues of orange flame. Shit! Chojuro was more vocal than Shinji as the two nearly had their faces burned off, but Chiyo's chakra strings pulled them off to the side. The searing heat turned their cheeks red as they were pulled to safety, but the red-haired puppet quickly directed his attention to his grandmother. "You're becoming very annoying, Chiyoba." The fan-like blades suddenly began to rotate, and despite the right side's dents, they performed their duty of providing the 35-year-old man a boost of speed as he rushed towards Chiyo like a bullet. "Chiyoba-sama!" Sakura quickly reacted, grabbing the older kunoichi and leaping out of harm's way as the puppet smashed its fist down, a small crater forming where Chiyo once stood. This time, Sasori was the one to perform consecutive attacks as he positioned his arms in the direction of the two kunoichi and unleashed the twin tongues of flame. The ground was scorched as the fires raced towards them, washing over them like a river over stone. Sasori kept pouring on the heat, literally, for several seconds before finally cutting off the attack. Emotionless eyes stared blankly at the ring of smoking ground and burnt grass, a cloud of blue piercing through the small cloud of dust and smoke to reveal Chiyo standing in front of Sakura. Her right arm raised and her entire forearm revealed to have opened out to generate a shield of chakra. "Great puppeteers think alike, it seems," Sasori commented, admiring his grandmother's prosthetic arm. He, that is true, but unlike you." Chiyo panted slightly as the chakra shield dissipated and the forearm panels fell back into place. "I have limits to what I'm willing to do. And that is why you're now old and weak." Sasori then reached into his pocket and pulled out the scroll that his opponents had all been fighting to prevent him from using, the binding strap that kept the scroll wrapped now undone. "I will give you a shinobi's death, Chiyoba, that much I can give you." "No!" Chiyo's eyes widened as the scroll unfurled. A sealing array was written across the scroll's length, the kanji for iron present in the center of the array. A burst of chakra and a plume of smoke sprung forth from the scroll, and the atmosphere of the battlefield suddenly felt much heavier as the 5 shinobi watched as the smoke dissipated. The 4 younger shinobi were all tense as they looked upon Sasori and the new puppet that stood beside him, but they were all slightly confused as they felt the chakra strings attached to their bodies suddenly begin to tremble. Glancing out of their peripheral vision, they watched as Chiyo's already pale skin grew that much paler, and her body shook as her eyes were as wide as a deer's. "I'm impossible." Clad in a cloak as black as night, the puppet hovered by the chakra strings Sasori had attached to it, its dark wood growing a bit darker as the clouds drifted in front of the sun. Spiked dark blue hair rustled in the wind and dark gold-colored eyes stared blankly ahead. "This one gave me quite a hard time, but I was able to add him to my collection eventually." Both puppet and user clacked their joints in unison. "Are you not proud of me, Chiyoba?" "Chiyoba-sama, what's going on? Who is that puppet?" That's our san named Kazekage." Chiyo managed to utter, her compatriots now matching her expression. "One of our best and brightest, both as Kazekage and at using Jiten jutsus where he was able to completely understand how Shikaka's use of sand manipulation to then recreate it and develop his own techniques." "The iron sand? Jiten?" Sakura looked to Chiyo with wide eyes. "So, he has a Kekei Genkai?" Chiyo nodded before raising her arms. Her chakra strings that were attached to the 3 Kirigakure shinobi activated, and the 3 males found themselves moving not of their own accord, being hurled through the air before safely landing in a line in front of Chiyo. I want to keep you all where I can see you. This battle just got that much harder, for even though we puppet user shinobi are not the most flashy and powerful, the fact that a Kage stands before you, even as a puppet, is not something we should take lightly. The others sweated slightly as they took in the wizened Kunoichi's words. A puppet is a puppet, Kito responded firmly. He's not the same as how the sand-named Kazekage would have been in life. There's no true thought going through that empty head, so once we get a good punch in, we can shatter it, just like we did that other puppet, and just like we'll soon do to Sasori himself. Sakura, Chojuro, and Shinji nodded in agreement with the Urashima clan member. You young folk, always so overconfident. Chiyo chuckled, but Kito's words did work somewhat to ease her nerves. We will likely have to make up a plan on the fly, Sakura said as she pulled on her gloves. The best we can do is to hold back the Kazekage and distract Sasori, give Chojuro an opening and then sever the threads. Sounds like a plan. Kito nodded to the pinkette. Chiyo-ba-sama, keep us on our toes? Chiyo's fingers glowed as her chakra strings seemed to tighten in reflection of her newfound determination. I got your backs, kiddos. The five were quickly forced out of their conversation as a sound akin to hissing echoed through the air. The source of said sound proved to be that of the Kazekage puppet, as what appeared to be black sand emerged from the maw of the golden-eyed human-turned contraption. The iron sand is formed from actual granulated iron fragments. Sasori must have implanted an iron source within the Kazekage's body, Chiyo surmised. Is it anything like Gaara's sand? Sakura asked, her mind flashing back to the Chunin exams, back when Gaara was once a bloodthirsty genin. It's heavier and denser than regular sand for obvious reasons. The jutsus the sand-dame crafted can literally crush you when used for offense, and can also forge durable defensive structures. The sound of the iron sand shifting through the air seemed to grow louder, and suddenly the massive cloud of ferrous material hovered above the battlefield paused as the Kazekage puppet released a horrifying series of clacks. Satetsu Shigure. Bullets of iron sand fell like rain, and the four younger shinobi quickly moved around the battleground to dodge the attacks that literally rained down upon them. The ground cracked and cratered, showing that Chiyo had not been understating just how heavy the iron sand was. Even these small throwing ball-sized fragments were packing enough of a punch to likely break bone and rupture organs due to their speed of descent. Everyone, get behind me! Sakura shouted. The boys followed her lead, and the moment they got behind her, she reared back her fist and punched downwards. The earth ruptured and raised, allowing Sakura to literally wrench free a massive piece of stone to use as a shield against the metallic onslaught. The thick stone was dense enough that the iron sand bullets were not able to completely punch through the protective earth, and so Sakura dug her fingers deeply into it. Shinaro! The stone cracked as Sakura secured her grip. Her muscles tensed, and with a roar that would make Tsunade proud, she hurled the massive piece of bedrock like a baseball. Visible streams of air resistance trailed behind it as it neared the Kazekage puppet and Sasori, but the iron sand that was lodged in the other parts of the battlefield quickly returned to their user. The iron sand twisted and morphed, becoming a solid hand-shaped construct. Kyurigane no Kabushi! The hand of iron sand caught the massive boulder, and in a great show of force, squeezed down, and caused the stone to implode and be reduced to literal dust. The Kazekage puppet clacked as if it were releasing a warning before the hand of iron sand reared up like a wave before crashing down upon the ground as the targeted shinobi were all pulled out of the way by Chiyo. As it crashed down, the iron sand spread out like a film of magma would after an eruption. The iron sand seemed to bubble in a similar fashion before it unleashed massive spikes with the intent of skewering those that were nearby. Luckily, Chiyo's skills kept them out of harm's way, and whenever a spike would be sent in Chiyo's direction, she pulled Shinji into their path so he could protect her by simply blocking them while donning bony armor plating. So it seems Chiyo-ba isn't the only annoyance here. The S-rank Nuknin mused. Let's see how well your bones can hold up against the sand-aim. Taking advantage of their frazzled states, Sasori sent out the Kazekage puppet to attack. The golden-eyed weapon made a beeline for Shinji, and the Kagaya clan survivor's eyes widened as the approaching puppet raised its right arm. Various compartments sprung open and revealed the arm was host to many crescent-shaped blades that would rend flesh from bone. Karamatsu no Mai! Shinji shouted as he unleashed sharp, curved bones from his joints as well as unleashing his ribcage spikes. Sparks flew as the crescent blades made contact against the hardened bones, and Shinji skidded backwards from the Kazekage puppet's swing. Tenshi Sendan! The drilling finger bullets dotted the air, like the Kazekage's rain of iron sand, but Sasori had the puppet maneuver easily through the storm of bone before it raised its left arm. The hand fell off to reveal a rotating buzzsaw, and the Kazekage unleashed both it and the right arm of crescent blades in a myriad of strikes. Sasori's arms were a blur, a testament to his skill as a puppet ninjutsu user. The Kazekage's arms moved as a reflection of that skill, but that exchange of blade versus bone came to a swift end as the tempered, poison-coated metal was seemingly no match for the Shikatsumiyaku Kekei Genkai. The shards of black and silver decorated the grass beneath Shinji's feet. However, the Kagai clan survivor was suddenly caught off guard as the puppet's cloak shifted. Two more arms emerged and crashed into the white-haired boy's body before compartments opened along the length of the newly appeared limbs. Each opening bore the kanji forehand, and in a cloud of chakra, a multitude of arms flew forth. Hundreds of wooden arms crashed against Shinji's body with all the force of a raging bull multiplied 10 times over. Shinji, Sakura, Kito, and Chojuro all rushed to their comrades' aid. They moved swiftly and struck as hard as they could. The wooden limbs were shattered, burned, and or sliced apart by the dozens, but the onslaught was seemingly never-ending as when one arm was destroyed, 5 more seemed to take its place. Fall back! Chojuro exclaimed. The 4 shinobi quickly jumped back and Shio pulled on their chakra strings to aid the retreat effort, but some of the arms suddenly opened up and unleashed metallic cords which wrapped securely around their bodies. Shit! Shio cursed as she tried in vain to fight against the multitude of cords, but they were tightly wound and would not break easily. And they surely would not snap from the physical strength of an elderly kunoichi nearing her 80s. The matter only grew worse as several other arms opened up at the wrist and began to unleash clouds of purple mist. Poison! They all thought. Immediately holding their breaths, the 4 young shinobi tried to fight their way out of Sasori's restraints. Her brain was always her best feature, and Sakura's was racing as it went through a myriad of ideas of how to escape. However, it was proving too very difficult to utilize super strength when you could barely move. Urashima Kito was in a similar predicament where even though his body was constantly in a state of having the kaimon open, it did not good when your body was bound and risked being destroyed by poisonous gas. Sakura's eyes shifted in reflection of her mind, searching for a way out. Her eyes widened as she recalled the story on the roof Sasuke had told her after Gaara was defeated. The story of how Naruto was the one who defeated him, and the methods which he performed to succeed. It was really quite embarrassing to perform and be the target of the 1,000 years of death, but apparently Naruto did it with a kunai while attaching an explosive tag to it, and it produced quite a shockwave. That's it! Sakura wriggled her body as much as she could, her restrained arms managing to reach to her weapon's pouch where she withdrew one of her explosive kunai. With a grunt she tossed the weapon as best as she could, her chakra flowing along the weapon to ignite the tag. With a massive boom, the resulting shockwave dispersed the poison cloud and the 4 shinobi all took a deep breath of air as they lay amongst shattered puppet limbs. Creative, Sasori commented as his eyes now focused on the pink-haired Chunin. The ex-Suna shinobi's chakra flared and suddenly the iron sand began to shift and coalesce in the air. A massive shadow formed as the iron sand became compact, forming a dense cuboid and pyramid. Oh no you don't! Kito and Sakura hurled kunai and shuriken at Sasori and the Kazekage puppet, but suddenly the metallic weapons veered off course. Some were wedged in the dirt, while others arced into the trees. It's generating a magnetic field. Sakura immediately diagnosed the problem. Our weapons are useless. Correct. Sasori nodded. I can also manipulate the magnetic fields to adjust the speed of iron sand projectiles. Now then, let's see you dodge these. Moving as if shot out of a cannon, the 2 iron sand constructs raced towards Sasori's opponents. If not for her quick reaction speed, Chio would not have been able to assist in moving her charges out of the way. The two constructs slammed down, causing massive craters to form. The Kazekage puppet clacked, and the constructs responded, rising back into the air. Twice more, the massive iron sand constructs were launched at them. The area of effect was massive, and soon, even forest trees were toppled, and the earth was torn asunder with each attack from the Kazekage puppet. Clouds of dust and smoke lay scattered across the ruined battlefield, only to be quickly dissipated by the resulting shockwaves as the dangerous geometric shapes crashed upon ground zero once again. The shinobi skidded backwards from their momentum as Chiyo assisted in their evasive maneuvers once again, but Sasori's emotionless eyes seemed to hold a glint to them as he quickly raised the Kazekage's arm. The pyramidal structure, which had landed near his grandmother's location, suddenly unleashed a lengthy spear-type construct. Chiyo leaped back, but while the ebony spear hadn't pierced through flesh, it did end up ripping through her prosthetic. The iron sand immediately moved its way through the joints, causing them to seize up. The elderly poison master quickly squeezed her upper arm, causing the prosthetic to loosen and immediately detach. The limb clattered on the ground, iron sand flowing from it like blood. Sasori's keen eyes saw as the chakra strings detached from the two they were connected to and acted quickly. "You don't have Chiyoba to help you here," the red-haired puppet exclaimed. "You won't be able to dodge this one." The cuboid was positioned high in the air, directly above Sakura, before being dropped. It fell swiftly, gravity aiding in increasing the speed of descent. The pink-haired kunoichi had no time to dodge, the structure was falling much too quickly. Her emerald orbs hardened, chakra was infused throughout her entire body, and in a single act of pure instinct, she clenched her fist tightly, and punched it. "Okasho!" Sakura cried out, a mighty shockwave racing out from the point of impact between her fist and the face of the cuboid. The chakra unleashed from the single point in her body caused iron sand to disperse slightly, but the primary effect was shown when the cuboid was sent directly skyward. It worked? The slug Sannin's apprentice looked as shocked as everyone else. Even Sasori, despite his expressionless visage, could only stare up at the deflected cuboid. Not one to miss an opportunity to follow up, the Urashima Nintaijutsu master took on a horse stance. "Kyumon Kai!" Kito's voice rang out through the forest, and a burst of chakra erupted from his body, cloaking it in a shroud of blazing blue for a moment. His legs tensed, and the Nintaijutsu specialist shattered the stone beneath his feet as he leaped towards the puppet shinobi. Sasori quickly reacted and sent forth the pyramidal iron sand structure, even going so far as to make it spin like a drill. Chakra cloaked Kito's arm as he cocked it back. "Urashima Ryu, Tekken!" He let the limb fly, and a powerful shockwave occurred as the pyramid crashed against his fist, and just as Sakura did, the massive construct was sent flying directly back towards the user. "How annoying!" Sasori grumbled as he used the Kazekage's Jiten to halt the countered shape's flight path. As if to vent his annoyance, Sasori then began to go on a rampage with the Kazekage puppet, unleashing strike after strike with the massive pieces of iron sand. However, having now discovered that they could literally brute force their way out of the situation, Kito and Sakura grinned toothily before literally punching away the problem. Each time the massive cuboid or pyramid was launched their way, either one of them would come to the aid of the other and knock it back with the intent of crushing the Kazekage puppet or Sasori with their own attacks. With each strike, a dust cloud would form, but so caught up in the battle was Sasori that he never registered the fact that some of the clouds of dust and dirt were not dust and dirt at all until it was already too late. The brown of the dust clouds was now obscured by the white of a massive cloud of mist, and Sasori was now in a position where he could not even see his hands in front of his own face nor the Kazekage puppet that was a merely 3 feet in front of him. "Kirigakure no Jutsu." Chojuro's voice echoed through the mist. As his predecessors did before him, the young shark-toothed-looking shinobi was a master of moving through the thick clouds of mist as were most Kiri shinobi. Thus, the blue-haired swordsman easily moved past the Kazekage puppet and cleanly severed the chakra strings that connected the two puppets to one another. The sound of the Sandame Kazekage clattering to the ground met Sasori's ears before he finally felt the sensation of something sharp piercing through the one piece of flesh and blood he had on his person. The mist began to dissipate per its user, and all eyes were now shown the scene of Shinji standing directly in front of Sasori with a dagger of bone speared through the core in his left pectoral. Huh! The former Suna shinobi managed to utter. So, this is what death feels like. And with those final words, Akasuna no Sasori clattered to the ground like the broken puppet he had become. The group watched as the puppet mask fell to the ground. For what seemed like minutes they stared in caution to expect him to get up, but upon the revelation that the legendary rogue sand shinobi was no more, they all relaxed their guard. Sakura fell flat to her knees with exhaustion as adrenaline kept her going through the intense battle, Chojuro on his buttocks with his hands still gripping upon his sword as he looked up to the ceiling and made a silent prayer. Shinji yanked his bone dagger from Sasori's core before Kito came up to him with a heavy pat on the back. Damn asshole caught us off guard having himself be a puppet. Hell, I color me impressed with that nonsense of him having a puppet of Kage as well. Kito looked over to Chio, no disrespect or anything, but your grandson was a psychopath for that shit. Chio glowered a bit at the mist shinobi before she sighed in defeat. As much as she hated to admit it, he was right, he grandson despite all the care she tried to provide him, teaching him puppetry. Providing the care she believed she could fulfill after the loss of his parents would be enough. Sadly, she knew deep down he had greater ambitions, and he attested to it by becoming what he believed to be perfect in his eyes. He wasn't always, though maybe I was blinded by it, she said as she carefully walked towards the marionette that was once her grandson. She bent down and examined his body thoroughly, flipping his body over as it laid face up as she continued to examine it. Sakura, after regaining some of her energy, walked over to the three with a questioning glance. Chio-sama, what are you? I know my grandson well enough that he had contingencies, Chio stated simply as she looked over the puppet's arms to see two seals. I don't doubt that my former protege and former leader may have been one of his masterpieces, but if he had learned anything from me, then I would know that wasn't his greatest weapon. She flared He Chakra one each seal as two scrolls dropped to the ground beside the body, one green and one red. Wait a minute! Chojuro cried out, are you telling us that he wasn't going all out? I gotta call bullshit, the nintaijutsu specialist stated. There ain't no way we put in all that work in one only, because Pinocchio over here was on an ego trip. No, I don't doubt it. That caught a wide-eyed glance from his companions. That man called his puppetry his art. Every artist takes pride into their work. Pride wouldn't allow them to use their greatest piece at the start of the presentation. Oh, for the love of Dash! Kito growled as rubbed his temples. You are actually telling me he really was holding out? To be fair, so were we. You nor I have utilized our full arsenal. I have to assume that none of our compatriots have as well. However, a shinobi of his caliber and mindset wouldn't have used his greatest of pieces unless it was truly necessary. I think if it wasn't for us catching him off guard, him attempting to use his final art would have been possible, the Kagaya noted. Kito scoffed at the remark before noticing Chio opening the red scroll, activating the seal array. Smoke clouded the area and quickly dissipated as soon as it came. Kito glanced around, his mother gaping, eyes slightly narrowed all the while witnessing the several bodies surrounding them. He scanned them all thoroughly, counting 100 in all, puppets cloaked in red garments in homage of their creator. Son of a bitch, he thought. 100 puppets, all the games probably would have stopped right there. Shinji stated it could have gone either way for us at that point. It would have indeed. I remember these cloaks, Chio stated. I remember hearing about 100 red-cloaked shinobi taking over one of the smaller border countries overnight. My guess is Sasori used these puppets. She gave a small chuckle. Took a little inspiration from me, I suppose. I used 10 puppets to raid a castle. He simply had to one-up me, she said before coughing, hand over her mouth as the coughs became louder. Chio-sama. Sakura rushed over to the old woman. The pinkette had noticed the cut from her senior's clothing and saw the purple liquid embedded with the traces of black sand. The iron sand was laced with poison. Yes, I started feeling the side effects moments before we subdued him. She looked over to Sakura. Though right now we must not worry for my safety, the Kazekage must take precedence. The pinkette was about to refute before feeling a sudden surge of chakra erupt within the area, a large current of wind blasting over the open ceiling and hitting the room. The gusts of wind died moments later, but the faint traces of chakra could still be felt on her skin, tingling the hairs on her body in fight or flight response. What was that? It felt so chaotic. Uzumaki's pissed off. Kito said simply, looking into the direction where the gust came from. Don't know what happened, but I can only think of a few things. Wait, how? Sensor, not the best, but practice makes perfect. Kito cut the pinkette off. I wouldn't have been able to sense anyone from a distance, but I was able to sense as if he was here with us right now. The Miss Shinobi walked over to the elder. You able to move with that toxin? A little, though the more I exert myself the more the poison will affect my further. Kito grunted as he knelt forward. He glanced over to the older woman, making his intentions known to her. She didn't chastise him, simply climbed onto the boy's back before he stood upright. Let's go then, we need to catch up with the rest of them, can't miss anything else. The Urashima clansman cried out before releasing fire chakra to his feet. He propelled himself into the air with Chio cursing with the sudden burst of momentum, landing at the top of the open area. Chojuro stammered at Kito's action before following in pursuit. Shinji only sighed as he looked at his team's antics. As carefree as his rival was, he could be serious to the action when needed. He walked past the pinkette before jumping toward the ceiling as well. Let us go, Harino-san. We don't have time to delay. All right. Sakura recomposed herself as she followed the group onward to their next destination. COR. Fucking shit. The Rouge Shinobi from IWA was hiding in dense bushes, holding his jaw with his remaining hand. His cheek was bulged, swollen to a dark purple hue from the impact of the blow he had received from the blonde adversary that came from the sky above. What was worse was not the indention, but the placement of his jaw. It was crooked, his right side of the lower jaw in an outward position, dislocated from the immediate impact of the blow, and the ground impact did not help navigate his pain elsewhere. The intense pain of the dislocation was firing in the synapses of Deidara's brain. He couldn't risk resetting the jaw without giving away his position. With dealing with the pain of his jaw and other injuries, he had no choice other than to play the waiting game. That son of a bitch, I'm going to kill that blonde the moment I see him, Jinchuriki or not. The tailed beast will regenerate in a couple years anyway. He moved his hand slowly away from his jaw to reach for the inside of the pouch. He felt its contents only to grab a bare minimum of what was left in his pouch. He formed the remaining amount of clay in his hand, comparable to that of a golf ball. He formed the last amount of clay into a bird, allowing it move up to the tree line before perching itself on top of the branch above him. That was the last amount of clay that I had left. He could have utilized his reserves conservatively, especially when using his clay dragon. He cursed himself for acting so callous, amateurish beyond his standards. Though he had planned to make up for his mistakes with his creation. While most of his medium-sized animal clay techniques were of his C1 category, this bird was of the C2 category, much like his dragon. His C2 category, his favorite of his arsenal, were of the more diverse variety. His dragon being able to be a large tank itself, it was able to launch miniature clay projectiles with ease as either landmines or guided missiles. The dragon, while his traditional C2, was not the only on in the category. This particular bird was also able to provide widespread damage as well. The C2 Suzaku, as he called, was a mid-sized caliber clay weapon of versatile use. It symbolized the tried definition of what it represented. Its lethality fell into two categories, the first allowing it to launch its feathers as they would burst into explosive flames. The second category was its death, breaking down into material, allowing itself to spread around the area to which it would ignite itself into an all-consuming flame. Its style was consistent to that of napalm weaponry. It wasn't his most dangerous technique, but dare say it was his most graceful. After all, he used this technique to escape Iwagakure during his fallout with the old fence-sitter. For this, it wasn't just making a flash escape, it was just a waiting game until the blonde got close enough to be in his safe zone to release the phoenix. It wouldn't need to get the blonde directly, just enough for the ash spread to surround him to where the flames would ignite him within the all-consuming flames. At that moment he noticed the blonde slowly descending into the forest, landing gracefully onto just a few hundred meters from Deidara's location. He watched carefully at the Konoha shinobi's movements as he touched ground with his toes of his sandals. He noticed the blonde mutter something under his breath, but its words were not reachable to Deidara's ears. Feeling the hairs of his body rise, he moved his hands slowly to prepare to release the Suzaku, flaring his chakra ever so slightly to commence his preemptive strike. It happened faster than he could see it. The tip of the chain had pierced his shoulder, the force behind it sending him smacking into the base of the tree trunk as he hung in place. The bomber grunted in pain, unable to pull out the chain due to his armless side. That was your first mistake. You shouldn't have moved, let alone flare your chakra like that. Naruto moved through the bushes. A singular chain link that connected to the spike that hung Deidara in place was connected to Naruto's backside as he strolled ever so closer to the Akatsuki member. Not like that made any difference for you though. Deidara glared at the blonde as he drew closer in until he closed the distance between them. Blue's eyes stared at the singular one before the younger shinobi spoke on. You caused quite the ruckus in Suna. I heard that you were the one that captured Gaara. Deidara, despite the pain over his lower jaw, he chuckled at the monotone of the blonde. Well, I thought I could bring a bit of thrill in the lives of the lovely sand people. They sure needed it, being a dump such as that. Well, I am sure no one expected a kaiju to just come out from the ground below, so such a shame no one could really focus on your weak performance after that. That got an irritated look from Deidara, who noticed the blonde's slight smirk. What? I am just being truthful. After all, could you have possibly been able to capture Gaara without that creature? You got a lot of confidence, brat. I'd suggest you shut that trap before someone does it for you. He grunted from, attempting to raise arm. It's pointless, by the way. Deidara grunted as he shifted his arm, trying to ignore the pain from the raised limb. Trying to use that bird. Naruto said simply, your chakra was restrained the moment you pinned. No sooner than that statement alone, another spike chain pierced through Deidara's forearm. The momentum from the adamantine chain didn't puncture through his arm. The impact destroyed the arm, an impact from the elbow down. Deidara screamed in pain before a hand slammed into his mouth, smacking his skull into the trunk. Naruto gripped the man's lower jaw tightly, staring at him with what was now glowing pale blue eyes. You don't get to scream, that was only a flesh wound. At least you're matched on both sides. He forcefully inserted his thumb inside his mouth upon the Nukenin's lower mandible, quickly pushing down the jawbone, followed by pulling it forward. Pop! A scream erupted from the older blonde from his jaw's sudden relocation, quickly silenced by quick punch to the sternum from the same hand that had reset his jawline in place. I said you don't get to scream. Grabbing a fistful of hair, he pulled the armless man's face toward him. Now that I did you a favor, you are going to start telling me everything. Gasping the wave of pain he had received from the blonde, Deidara looked at the gaze of the blonde. Talk about what? I want information, simple as that. Naruto stated, I want details on each Akatsuki member that is on your little roster. 4 of you are confirmed so far just by going over the bingo book before reach to you and your fellow compatriot. That means you, Deidara the Mad Bomber, Sasori of the Red Sand, the Butcher of Konoha's prestigious clan Itachi Uchiha, and the monster of the Kirigakure himself, Kisame Hashigaki. You are all connected to this lovely group of Boy Scouts who decided that instead of playing with your tallywhackers, decide to hunt down the W.M.Ds of hidden villages. I want names, I want plans. Deidara looked the boy flabbergasted. Are you an idiot, or something? Do you honestly think I'm gonna tell you shit, you snot-nosed brat? He sneered. Oh, but I insist, you must. Like fucking hell I will, you gah, said Nukenin, screamed from his tirade as 3 chains pierced through him and embedded themselves into the tree. 2 had pierced right into his kneecaps, the other into his other shoulder. Naruto stared indifferently as the screaming slowly ceased, only groans of pain coming out of the older man's throat. You seem to be mistaking yourself with think you have the option. You don't have that option. That luxury went out the moment you did 3 things that you made personal to me. Deidara felt his body tense up as he felt a current of electricity flow through him. His body tensed at first for what felt like minutes to him, only to be 10 seconds. Your first mistake was joining this group to hunt down Jinchuriki such as myself. Deidara grunted as his body tensed further. He felt the searing pain become more intense, as his body started to shake until the surging of lighting through the chains ceased. Secondly, you attack who I can consider as one of my best friends, attack his home, which is allied to my village, take their leader, that is himself, and nearly kill him. The pain was much higher this time, his body tensed up and started to convulse by the electrocution. It was longer, more intense from the last. His skin was turning red, veins raising as his cardiovascular system. If he wasn't focused on the pain, Deidara would smell the charring off flesh and skin around his wounds. His eye rolled back, mouth frothing as the body convulsed. As the surge of electricity ceased from his body, he continued its convulsion before ceasing minutes later. He wheezed as his breathing was severely labored. The older blonde could feel his heart strain throughout his body. Your third mistake, trying to kill my friend Fu with your Play-Doh. Now. Naruto took a step closer as he, grabbing a handful of the barely conscious blonde's hair, as he stared at the fairly glazed eye of his adversary. I just dosed you with 10,000 volts, going all the way up to 100,000 in a total of 5 minutes. Give me names or the next one will be higher. Deidara breathing was labored, his body seared and shriveled in agony as he felt every ounce of oxygen enter and release into his system. Those few moments provided enough energy to endure the pain and look at the blonde with pure anger. You, friend, the green-haired bitch? Deidara's voice was hoarse and crisp from talking, but it was loud enough, the essence of anger coursed through his words in volume. You mean that other Jinchuriki that you are oh so trying to save? The restrained rogue shinobi looked at the younger male to see no reaction upon his face, but he could see the small glint, the pale hue in his eyes that flicked as though he was poking a bear. An internal smile stimulated outward onto Deidara's physical features as he gave a rough chortle. Oh ho ho, I got you a little triggered, didn't I? Well, don't worry, you saved her for now. You diverted our plans a bit there. She was supposed to be our first target, but when one of our fellow team members went back to his hometown, he and his partner found out that she wasn't there anymore. We had some details, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together until we found out you came. Deidara leaned his head forward. It seems you just have the habit of trying to save everyone. Well, you can't, you're just delaying it all. You think you can just stop us? I mean, really stop us? Deidara grinned madly. Your little ragtag crew may have taken down Sasori and I, but do you even think you can take down the rest of us? It'll only be a matter of time till we bring you all down. You may be S-class shinobi, but you are also just men wearing matching cloaks like some cult. You'll fall like any shinobi before you. Naruto stated in a matter-of-fact tone. Oh, you are only part right, we may be men, but even men can be monsters, even men can be gods. A little bit of an ego there. I doubt such claims can be made by someone of your position, a mad bomber, believing he is able to create art through petty fireworks. Naruto scoffed. I don't see nothing godly about that at all. Monster? Maybe I know you have at least 1 or 2 claiming that title, but you are just a second puppet now tangled in strings. Deidara grinned madly, a puppet who at least got the job done taking the trash out. Upon seeing Naruto's look, he gave into a fit of laughter which soon became loud and robust, before a hand was placed upon his head. Deidara stopped his laughter momentarily before he held a smirk upon his face. Can't take a little joke, can you, huh? All right then, since I am the honorable sort, I can give you a little something, a parting gift. He looked dead straight into the eyes of his fellow blonde before speaking once more. A monster born from mist, a puppet that bleeds sand, a bomb made of clay, a murder of crows, a chameleon, a joker, a weeping angel, a mad cultist, a zombie, and a god of many paths. He just provided monikers. I am surprised the fool gave them up so easily, Kamina said. He would have lost a losing battle regardless. Had he not provided any information, it was likely enough he would have been shocked to death or tortured in Konoha or Suna for information. Kurama stated. It's more than that. He knows I am going to kill him. Naruto thought as he processed the information provided to him. I'm too invested after what he did, and he knows that. He could have blown himself up, but I disarmed him from being able to. He could bite his own tongue off, and that wouldn't probably do much. Chances are we could get a Yamanaka to mind delve into his conscience and grab every bit of information that we can. He's telling me this to goad me, to taunt me, most of all to boast his pride. Naruto told the duo. Then don't let his ego get to you. It's unbefitting, and you know who you are as a person, a shinobi. The Thunder Beast spoke aloud. He could feel the pressure of Naruto's chakra encroached his mind and body like a bubbling storm, flooding through the pathways in disarray. Actions like this never bother coming out through the blonde's training. The boy was able to control it with ease. Seeing it now so unexpectedly now, though, even he felt somewhat alarmed. Allowing one's emotions to govern your actions can be reckless in of itself, Naruto. One must always be better than those who attempt to manipulate us in doing what they want us to do. I know that. Naruto placed his hand on Deidara's chest as he channeled chakra into the man's body. Yet I want him to pay. He owed the Raijuu as eyes glowed an ominous blue. Deidara could feel the sudden change around the Jinchuriki as his body instantaneously convulsed. Every nerve in his body became enlarged, veins rising above, the chemicals produce in his body on overcharge. The Mad Bomber's eyes rolled back as his body convulsed, mind overstimulated with the overwhelming current in his body. What would have felt like minutes to hours of pain to Deidara was only mere seconds to Naruto as he watched perspiration of blood and sweat boil through Deidara's skin. What would be his chakra pathways glowed an ethereal pale hue that caused his body to light like a Christmas tree. You want to be like gods, you say? The son of Minato Namikaze spoke to the unresponsive rogue shinobi, then rise. What was once Deidara had now become energy, body converting from flesh and bone to a pure electric form. Deidara would not feel this transition as he passed on from life turned into that of lightning. His new form as energy ignited upward like lightning returning to the heavens. Nothing would remain of that was on Deidara's body except for his metal headband that laid on the ground where he passed.